Chapter 966. The door of the private room was pushed open from the outside, and two people walked in while talking and laughing. One of them was very old and he was holding a book in his hand. It was obvious that he was a scholar. The other person had a very strong appearance and it was obvious that he was not a local. The students did not care about the foreigner. In their eyes only the white-haired scholar was left. "Teacher." Cece was the first to stand up. She immediately greeted him with a smile. "You're here. Why didn't you call me and ask me to pick you up?" The scholar was not so particular. He waved his hand and said in a scholarly manner, "It's only 2 or 3 steps away and I know which private room it is. There's no need for you to pick me up." He did not like Cece, but he did not dislike her either. No matter how outstanding Cece was in the country, he would only acknowledge her as his disciple in his heart. The scholar did not notice Helian Weiwei, who was standing outside the crowd. In order not to lament like an old man, he introduced the foreigner beside him to Cece and the others who surrounded them. "This is Robert. You should have heard of his name before. There is never a case that he cannot win in the judicial field. After graduation many of you will enter the legal field. If you have any difficult cases in the future you can look for him. But remember, Robert is very busy. If you encounter a difficult case, don't look for him, understand? Do you understand?" The scholar was undoubtedly a good teacher. After graduation, there were very few professors who still wanted to introduce their own connections to their students. Robert was a gentleman. He tilted his head and smiled. He had the typical forthrightness of an American. "Hey, old Yuan, although I'm very good, I'm not that good. There are still some cases that I can't win." He spoke in English, but it did not hinder the people present from communicating. After all, they were all graduates from famous universities. Even if they did not learn English well, they could still communicate with each other. For lawyers like them, Robert was simply a godlike figure. There were countless legends about him. Those who were in this line of work had heard of his name. Cece had always wanted to meet her teacher's good friend, but her professor had never introduced her to him. Cece did not know the reason until she went to visit the professor's house. She heard the professor's wife whispering, "Do you want to keep these connections and give them to Helian Vivian in the future? Old Yuan, why are you so stubborn? What's so good about that child? In my opinion, she can't be compared to Cece at all." "What do you know?" The professor's voice sounded angry at first, but then he slowly lowered his voice like he was sighing. "Nowadays, people in this field are either competing for connections or merits. Everyone wants to be a lawyer to make money, but who would be willing to fight for those who really need justice? Are you saying that Weiwei doesn't like money? Come on, who is different from who? Old Yuan, you have lived to this age. How can you be so muddle-headed?" The professor's wife was still trying to persuade him. The professor shook his head like a dying old man. "I was the one who taught Weiwei personally. She was the only disciple I acknowledged back then. It wasn't because of her high attainments in law, but because you haven't met this child. This child looks normal on the surface, but in fact she should have experienced a lot. In the field of law, you never need people who are like a blank piece of paper, because this blank piece of paper will eventually be dyed black. The strong people who seek justice for others are always those who have experienced darkness and know all kinds of unspoken rules, but their hearts are still bright. She has her own way of doing things, and this way of doing things is very suitable in this field. Her methods have never been upright. When she was in school she was only in her early 20s, but she already knew how to use underhanded methods. But this is nothing, because what she wants to do is very upright. This child has justice in her heart. Cece can't do it. She wants to acknowledge me as her teacher because she values my connections in this field. If I am just an ordinary teacher, she will not come to me every 2 to 3 days. The two of them are fundamentally different. How can I be assured to hand everything over to her?" Cece's face was extremely gloomy at that time. She, who was separated by a wall, crushed the strawberries that she was washing. Her heart was full of disdain. What air was it now? It was all about who had a better family background. Even reading novels and watching TV shows was for the sake of relaxation and happiness. Who would care about the sense of justice? If this old man could not help her, Cece would have left directly. Did he really think that she was willing to serve him? Didn't he feel that Weiwei, that woman, couldn't be compared to anyone? She actually wanted to see if the teacher knew that the student he originally valued the most was now merely a broken car mechanic, would he still talk about some bullshit sense of justice? Thinking of this, Cece opened her mouth again, By the way, teacher, you still don't know, right? This time Wei Wei is here too. She turned her head and said, I say, all of you move aside and let Wei Wei come over. There were too many students regardless of gender. As soon as they entered, they surrounded Professor Yuan, blocking his view. Obviously, Professor Yuan did not expect to see Hellion Vivian again. After all, ever since she transferred to another school, no one knew where she went. Du Cece pulled Professor Yuan's arm. You still don't know, right? Wei Wei's life is a little tough now. Her boyfriend can't help her. She can only ride her motorcycle to work every day. After fixing the car, her whole body is covered in dirt. She also has to take care of her child. Professor Yuan was undoubtedly heartbroken when he heard this news. He looked at Hellion Vivian, who was walking towards him. He knew that this profession was not easy. However, in his heart, anyone could choose not to be a lawyer. But how could Hellion Wei Wei not be a lawyer? Professor Yuan could not imagine how the student he was most proud of lived the life that Du Cece mentioned. Hellion Vivian walked in front of him and then stopped in front of him. She smiled faintly. You haven't changed at all. You still like to hold a law dictionary in your hand. Is it in English? Styled. What a pity. Professor Yuan did not know what to say. His eyes were a little bitter. It's good that you're back. Wei Wei, you don't know that after you left, teacher has been talking about you every day. After all, teacher has spent too much effort on you. Li Meng let out a long sigh. But who would have thought that not only did you not become a lawyer, but you also worked as a car mechanic in a small place. You have really let down teacher's cultivation. Hellion Vivian did not say anything because she was not looking at Du Cece. Instead, she was looking at Robert meaningfully. Robert felt that he was hallucinating. Oh my God. Chapter 967. How did he see her here? Robert was so excited that he opened his arms and wanted to give Hellion Vivian a hug. He did not expect that someone would be one step faster than him. He directly reached out his hand and pulled Hellion Wei Wei back, pulling her into his embrace. Robert was so excited that he did not even look at the man who warned him. Wei, why are you here? How many years have we not seen each other? It's been 3 years. God, if those people know that you're still alive, they will definitely go crazy. What's going on? Du Cece and Li Meng were stunned. As Robert spoke too fast, some of the students did not realize what was going on. Hellion Vivian spoke in fluent English. I've always been alive. Don't curse me, Robert. You better stop your habit of dancing around. If your fist accidentally touches a teacher, I don't mind throwing you out of the window. Oh wait, you're still so cool. Robert's eyes lit up. Then he furrowed his brows and spoke in a foreign accent in Chinese. But when did you become a mechanic? Is it because my Mandarin is not good enough that I didn't understand? Hellion Vivian smiled casually. I'm indeed repairing a car now. Oh my God. What's wrong with you? Why did you come to China to repair a car? Robert's tone was so exaggerated that he could act out at any moment. Professor Yuan knew that there were not many people who could make Robert act like this. Do you know each other? Not only do we know each other, but I lost 3 times in the past. Each time I lost because I fought with her. When Robert mentioned Hellion Vivian, he started to dance around subconsciously. Old Yuan, is she your student? Oh right, when I met her in America she did introduce herself as a student. But don't you know that she already has a lawyer's license? It's probably because undergraduates are not allowed to go to court in China. But it's different in America. She was very popular back then. Oh right, in China terms she was very popular. Many people went to see her in court. The information that I gave you before was all about her cases. In an instant, Du Cece and Li Meng's faces turned pale. It was as if all the blood had been sucked out of their faces. The female students behind them had been mocking Hellion Vivian for not getting a degree and becoming a car mechanic. Previously they used the excuse of Du Cece ordering coffee in English to ridicule Hellion Wei Wei. They assumed that Hellion Wei Wei was a country bumpkin who did not know anything. But now, after hearing Hellion Wei Wei's extremely fluent English, they realized that something seemed to have gone wrong. But that was not all. They did not expect that a person who did not even get a degree would be better than a godly figure in the lawyer's world. They also did not expect that Hellion Vivian had already gone to court in America when she was still in school. Even with Du Cece's outstanding performance in the industry, she might not be able to go to court in America. The gap between them was obvious without a comparison. Du Cece gritted her teeth and forced herself not to show an awkward expression. But how could the two-faced Qingchen let her go? She reached out her little hand and grabbed her brother's hand. She pointed at Du Cece and said, "Just now this auntie said that she wants Mom to go to her company to be an assistant. She also wants to introduce the useless men in her company to Mom. She thinks she's better than Mom because Mom doesn't have a degree." Her childish voice sounded like she was complaining. Bailey Shangxie reached out and patted his younger brother's little head. "Stupid," he said coolly. "I think so too." After little Qingchen finished speaking, he nodded obediently. The two little ones did not hesitate to protect Hellion Vivian. Just a few words were enough to make Du Cece unable to escape. At that moment, Du Cece wished that there was a hole in the ground for her to hide in. She only felt a burning sensation on her face, but she had to smile and explain to Professor Yuan, who was frowning at her. "I saw that Wei Wei was working too hard, so I wanted to find a job for her. I didn't expect that she would hide it so well. Oh, now it seems that I was meddling in other people's business. I really didn't expect Wei Wei to be so powerful." Li Meng also wanted to help Du Cece out. After all, they were on the same side. Yes. Cece had good intentions. She didn't want to overreach herself. "Qingchen, you're still young. You don't understand that this is how old classmates are. When you see that others are not doing well, you want to help them. Now that we know that Wei Wei is so good, we are happy for her." Only Li Meng herself knew how reluctant she was to say those words. Originally, they wanted to make Hellion Vivian be ridiculed after the student union meeting. They wanted Professor Yuan to know that it was a mistake for him to not accept Cece as his disciple. However, they didn't expect that they would be the ones who couldn't free themselves. Not only did Hellion Vivian not disappoint Professor Yuan, but because of Robert's appearance, he looked at Hellion Vivian with a gratified expression. Even the students' gazes changed. Everyone was looking at Hellion Vivian, Cece and Li Meng. The more they were like this, the more jealousy Li Meng felt. What kind of luck did Hellion Vivian have? Isn't she just a lawyer? Even if she isn't a mechanic, the current her can't be compared to Li Meng and Cece. That's because the men they have are different. After understanding this, Li Meng calmed down. She didn't care about how others were looking at her and Du Cece. She only gave Du Cece a look. Du Cece was smart. She quickly changed her mood and said to Hellion Vivian, "Wei Wei, I really wanted to help you. That's why I said that. Also, I didn't understand the situation. You won't blame me, right?" This kind of saying was very common in reality. What a woman who stole her best friend's boyfriend would do the most was to say, "You won't blame me, right?" after hurting someone else. This way of gaining sympathy was very easy to accept. It wasn't because the person involved accepted it, but because the people around them were very tolerant. We are all old classmates." Cece definitely didn't mean anything else. In fact, everyone knew that Cece didn't mean anything else. However, in this kind of situation, plus Du Cece's identity, no one wanted to make a big deal out of it. It was just because of one sentence. Professor Yuan was protecting Hellion Vivian. His face sank and he wanted to say something. Hellion Vivian stopped him. Everyone knew that someone as strong as Hellion Vivian wouldn't let an old man stand up for her. After all, she liked to do everything by herself. Chapter 968. However, before Hellion Vivian could do anything, the two little ones tacitly stood in front of her and blocked her path. It will be very ugly when a lie is exposed. The person who spoke was Bailey Shangxie. He was still wearing his leather jacket and his small face was very cool. He was obviously a child, but when he smiled he gave off an indescribable evil vibe. Du Cece was amused when she heard this. Even if she had guessed Hellion Vivian's occupation wrongly and wanted to embarrass Hellion Vivian, so what? What kind of lie was this? Auntie has just explained that this is all a misunderstanding. Du Cece smiled and reached out to touch Bailey Shangxia's head. Bailey Shangxia moved and took a step back with his brother in his arms. He looked at Du Cece and it was obvious that he did not want to be close to her. At this point, Du Cece was better at pretending than others. Even if it was embarrassing, she could still make herself look as if nothing had happened. Just like now, after Bailey Shangxia dodged her attack, she did not immediately withdraw her hand. Instead, she turned her head and smiled at Hellion Wei Wei. "Wei Wei, look, you're still holding a grudge against me. Okay, it's my fault. Today's expenses will be on me as an apology to Wei Wei. Vivian, since Cece has said so, you shouldn't make things difficult for her. Li Meng turned her head and said to the surrounding students, "It's not easy for the teacher to come today. Moreover, they're a foreign guest. If you want to play, you should play to your heart's content." As she spoke, she patted Du Cici's arm and said, "Cici, quickly ask them to serve the dishes. You have a sharp tongue but a soft heart. With your family background and appearance, you are already half a person who is going to marry into the Jiwei group. Yet you always like to worry about others. Look, there has been a misunderstanding." Du Cici felt wronged. How would I know that others would think of me like this? Those are just children's words. Don't take them seriously. Weiwei still cares about you, right, Weiwei? Li Meng looked at Hellion Vivian and smiled faintly. "Let's talk about something else. Since the teacher is here, we still don't know what your boyfriend does." Baligaju, who had been called out, had been sitting on the wooden chair, playing with something with his slender fingers. It seemed that he had not said a word since the beginning. But even so, his sense of existence was not exploited in the slightest. After hearing Li Meng's words, Baligaju suddenly curved his thin lips and put the thing that he had been playing with in his hand on the table. If Li Meng had found out what was in his hand, she wouldn't have been so stupid to ask this question. But it was obvious that no matter how rich the Qing family was, it was just an empty shell in terms of education. No matter how many luxury goods they bought, they would not be involved with Italian brands. So they would not know that the simplest matchbox in Baligaju's hand was worth an ordinary person's monthly salary. Robert noticed the flash of silver light, but he did not say anything. This was because he found this scene to be quite interesting. When Du Cici saw that Baligaju had no intention of speaking, she continued, "Is it inconvenient for you to say it? If that's the case, then we won't make things difficult for you. There's nothing inconvenient about it." His Highness' voice was always pleasant to listen to, especially when he revealed a devilish smile. It made people feel graceful and noble. "My company is Ju Wei." This sentence originally had two meanings. However, Du Cici and the others would never think of the second meaning. They would only think that he was just an employee. "Weiwei, why didn't you tell us earlier that your boyfriend works in Ju Wei Group?" Li Meng looked at Hellion Vivian. "If you had told us earlier, we could have asked Cici to talk to her uncle and ask for a promotion for your boyfriend." Du Cici pushed Li Meng. "Stop talking. Otherwise Weiwei will think too much." "What's there to think about? You're going to be the lady boss of Ju Wei Group in the future. Weiwei won't be so narrow-minded. Her boyfriend will definitely be willing to be promoted by your uncle," Li Meng said matter-of-factly. Professor Yuan frowned when he heard this. He looked at Hellion Vivian worriedly. Hellion Vivian poured a cup of tea for the old man. She did not say anything and was still as calm as ever. Just when everyone thought that Weiwei would not speak, she wiped her fingers with a napkin and looked up casually. "Lady boss." Li Meng looked at her as if she still didn't understand. "Didn't we just say that Cici's blind date is the CEO of Ju Wei Group? Weiwei, does your boyfriend never talk to you about his company?" "That's enough, Li Meng." Du Cici held her back and smiled at Hellion Vivian. She acted as if she was the one in charge of Ju Wei Group. "I'll tell my uncle about your boyfriend later. If he's really capable, it shouldn't be a problem for him to be promoted." A few female classmates who were trying to curry favor with Du Cici came over when they heard this. "Cici, what about us? Can we also work in Ju Wei Group? If it's really not possible, I can be a manager. Isn't it just taking care of celebrities? We can definitely do it." "Okay, I'll help you talk to him when the time comes." Du Cici smiled. Hellion Vivian spoke again. "An outsider shouldn't be in charge of Ju Wei Group, right?" Hellion Vivian said this sentence very slowly. It was so slow that Du Cici narrowed her eyes. "Weiwei, Cici is not an outsider." A female classmate laughed. "Although this kind of thing won't happen to you, it's very normal for Cici. When the time comes and everything is settled, you won't say this anymore. Cici, when you get married, you must send an invitation to Weiwei." Du Cici reached out and ran her fingers through her long hair. "Actually, Weiwei is right. We haven't even started dating yet. I'm indeed still an outsider now." As she spoke, she looked to the side. "Where's the waiter? Why isn't he here yet? Call your manager over. Tell him that I'm here. Even if I'm an outsider, I can still order people around." Ju Wei Group service was really good. As soon as Du Cici finished speaking, a waiter walked over. "Madam, how can I help you?" Du Cici glanced sideways and was very arrogant. "Call your manager over. Tell him that my surname is Du." The waiter did not move. He stood there and frowned. "Why aren't you going?" Du Cece's voice turned cold. In the end, the waiter decided to report to the higher-ups first. Please wait a moment. Chapter 969. Cece, you're amazing. When Du Cece heard the compliment, she smiled even more happily. She then poured a cup of tea for Lecturer Yuan. Lecturer, you can try the grilled duck tongue here later. It's really authentic. As she spoke, she turned her head to Hellion Weiwei and said, Weiwei, it's fine if you don't want my help. After all, your boyfriend definitely doesn't want to use my relationship to climb up the social ladder. I understand all these. Before Hellion Vivian could say anything, Beligaju responded with a playful, oh. A hint of mockery could be seen in his eyes. Your relationship? What relationship do you have? Du Cece still felt that his face was too handsome. She couldn't help but feel weak in her legs. However, she quickly recovered and said in a disdainful tone, You'll know in a while. The reason why she said this was because the waiter had walked in. She wanted to show Hellion Vivian that the distance between them wouldn't change just because of who was better at winning a lawsuit. Her wealth and connections were not something these people could compare to. Compared to Hellion Vivian's boyfriend who only had looks, the man she would get in the future would be 1 in a million. This was because even if she didn't get him now, she would be able to make decisions in the Emperor Hotel. Thinking of this, Du Cece raised her chin even higher. She turned her head and looked at the waiter. Is the person I asked you to call here? Yes. The waiter looked at Du Cece. Madam, the manager you mentioned is no longer in our hotel. The person who came today is our person in charge. When Du Cece heard the words person in charge, she felt even more proud. It doesn't matter who comes. Let's order the dishes first. Introduce the ingredients today and tell me which one is the freshest. I'm sorry, madam. The person in charge originally had a professional smile on his face. However, when he saw the man in a black trench coat at the end of the private room, his voice trembled. The words he wanted to say were completely stuck in his throat. He must be dreaming. Why would Ju always appear here? Isn't he supposed to be traveling outside? Why didn't anyone tell him that CEO Ju is back? The person in charge's heart was boiling. He wanted to run to Beligaju. However, he didn't know what was going on and he didn't dare to act rashly. Where's Special Assistant Long? Where's Manager Chi Ling? Where are they? How could he let CEO Ju out alone? Wait a minute. It wasn't just CEO Ju alone, there was also the young Master Devil. What was he holding in his arms? A child about the same age as him? Since when did the demonic young master become so compassionate? He didn't usually have this kind of attitude towards children. No, that was not right. Not only did he not have such an attitude towards children, but he also made adults suffer in the company. Back then, he had wanted to leave the corporation as soon as possible and come to Emperor Sky's branch to be in charge of food because of the demonic little young master. In any case, he wasn't going to be in charge of an entertainment company because he hadn't forgotten that the young Master Devil had said that he wanted to enter the entertainment industry. The person in charge turned around and coincidentally saw Bailey Shangxia sitting in the corner with his little brother in his arms. It was obvious that Bailey Shangxia knew the person in charge. When Shadow first brought these humans to him, he had to play with them for a while. Among his toys, this human was quite interesting. If the person in charge knew what Bailey Shangxia was thinking, he would definitely cry. Unfortunately, he was only thinking about why the CEO, who didn't like to go out, would suddenly come to the place he was in charge of for a meal. Could it be that he wasn't satisfied with the recent performance of Emperor Sky Hotel? The person in charge recalled what punishment the previous subordinate who made CEO Ju unhappy received and felt a chill down his spine. Even when Du Cece called out to him twice, he didn't respond. The waiter had never seen the person in charge lose his composure like this. Was it because the temperature in the private room was too low? Why did he have an illusion that the person in charge's hand was trembling? Director Liang, the guest is calling you. The waiter couldn't help but pull the person in charge's sleeve. The person in charge regained his senses and immediately stood up straight under Beligaju's gaze and said to Du Cece, I'll prepare the ingredients for you immediately. The person in charge's humble attitude made the other students believe Du Cece's words without a doubt. They felt that Du Cece was very capable. Du Cece was a little surprised. After all, no matter how powerful her uncle was, he would only ask the manager to come out for a while. It was also her first time meeting the person in charge. She didn't expect that her uncle's position in Ju Wei Group was higher than she expected. The unexpected reward made her feel even more proud as she enjoyed the envious gazes around her. She pointed at the menu with her red finger and said, "Let's have the lobster first. Teacher likes lobsters. Li Meng, take a look and see what you want." She passed the menu to Li Meng as she spoke. The person in charge was about to nod his head and say yes when he saw the man sitting on the seat curling his thin lips. The coldness in his eyes was definitely not satisfactory. In an instant, cold sweat broke out on the person in charge's forehead. Did he do something wrong? But these people were CEO Ju's acquaintances. Did CEO Ju want him to refuse? The person in charge guessed carefully and said tentatively, "I'm sorry, madam. According to our hotel's regulations, the lobster dish must be pre-ordered." CEO Ju finally moved his gaze away from him. It seemed that he was on the right track this time. Du Cece didn't understand why the person in charge's attitude changed so quickly. The other students were somewhat disappointed as well. "We need to pre-order? I thought that we could eat the freshest lobster with Cece." Du Cece felt a little embarrassed at this time. She closed the menu in her hand and said politely, "I never needed to pre-order before coming here. It's the same this time. Since you're the person in charge of this hotel, you should be an old acquaintance of my uncle. My uncle's surname is Du and he's one of the higher-ups in Ju Wei Group." Du. When the person in charge heard this surname, he subconsciously looked in the direction of his boss. Was he the one who was banned by CEO Ju during the meeting this morning? Du Cece was puzzled by the person in charge's gaze. "What are you looking at?" The person in charge opened his mouth. What should he say to satisfy CEO Ju? Baligaju didn't make things difficult for his subordinate. He tilted his head and sat on the wooden chair. His slender fingers twirled Hellion Vivian's long hair. He started to release the coldness that he had been thinking about for a long time with a faint smile. Du Dewey was fired this morning. How can he be considered a higher-up? Chapter 970. What did you say? Du Cece raised her head. She did not intend to accept such an excuse. Her voice was filled with anger. What do you mean by fired? That's impossible. Wei Wei, shouldn't you control your boyfriend in such an occasion? Ask him to watch his words. Not only will he damage my uncle's reputation, but it will also affect the Ju Wei Group. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and was ready to roll up her sleeves to fight. She did not care if she had to use her mouth or her hands. She was not going to let Du Cece off the hook. She was not going to allow anyone to bully His Highness. As an arms tycoon, how could she tolerate others talking about her other half like that? She must show her domineering and mighty aura. Hellion Wei Wei's plan was correct. However, before she could get up, Baligaju, who was sitting beside her, pressed on her shoulder with one hand and stood up. He casually threw away the matchbox in his hand, leaving only the cigarette between his fingers. He looked at the person in charge not far away. It was obvious that he wanted the person to get over here. The person in charge reacted quickly. When he saw Baligaju, he immediately walked over and said in a panicked tone, "Sioju, I have a fire here. I have a fire here." Sioju. These two words seemed to have penetrated everyone's brain. All the students present were stunned and their thoughts were tangled into a mess. Li Meng looked at the man who was called a poor employee in a daze. Her face was drained of blood. No, it can't be what I think it is. Du Cece's lips trembled because of the way she was addressed. She slowly turned her head around and her throat hurt from the pressure. "W, what did you just call him?" The person in charge did not speak. He only looked at Baligaju respectfully. His expression was still nervous. However, he repeated the name, Sioju. The two words were so clear that Du Cece could no longer lie to herself that she had heard wrongly. Her body trembled and she fell back into the wooden chair. How could this be? How could Hellion Vivian's poor boyfriend be the king of the business world? The person in charge didn't look at her and didn't know what was going on. He was just very confused. Didn't this group of people know CEO Ju? Then why would CEO Ju appear in this private room with them? CEO Ju, the person in charge stuttered when he spoke again. Baligaju, on the other hand, seemed to be easy to talk to. He reached out and patted him on the shoulder. With the same smile, he said, "Relax? How am I supposed to relax when demons patrol?" The person in charge roared in his heart, but on the surface he still said respectfully, Yes, but why are you here? Is there a problem with the hotel's recent performance?" Although he shouldn't have asked this question, the person in charge felt a chill in his heart. Bailey Jiaju's action of throwing the matchbox just now had scared him out of his wits. That was why he accidentally asked the question that had been bothering him for a long time. Baligaju seemed to be surprisingly easy to talk to today. He reached out and held Hellion Vivian's finger. His other hand flicked the cigarette on his finger. She is here for a party. I am accompanying her as a family member. Oh, what? At first, the person in charge couldn't react. When he came back to his senses, he suddenly looked at Hellion Vivian. Could this be the legendary wife of the CEO? He really wanted to know what kind of secret this is. Baligaju didn't care about the person in charge's expression. After all, he didn't say this sentence for his subordinates to hear. There is one thing that I am very curious about. Baligaju seemed to be very indifferent. He glanced at Du Cici's ugly face and said, Miss Du, didn't you say that you have seen me and even had a meal with me? Why can't you recognize me even though I am standing here? Just one sentence made Du Cici's whole body tremble. Her face was very pale and the hand that was holding the menu was trembling. From the beginning you said that you know Juwei Group very well. Baligaju's thin lips curled up. His smile was so perfect that it could almost move everyone. However, no one knew that the more he smiled, the more dangerous it was. Miss Du, do you know why Juwei Group is called Juwei Group? Du Cici couldn't say anything. Since things had come to this, she only wanted to explain. Ju Xiuju, this is all a misunderstanding. The reason why Juwei Group is called Juwei Group is because my mother is Hellion Vivian and my father is Baligaju. Qingchen's clear voice interrupted Du Cici's words. She looked at her like a little girl. Her face was cold and cute. Hellion Vivian, Baligaju Vivian Ju, that's why it's Juwei? Some of the female students covered their mouths and looked at Hellion Vivian. At this point, almost everyone understood what was going on. Hellion Vivian was the real lady boss of Juwei Group. In fact, she had been the lady boss since the beginning of the company. In a more straightforward way, the reason why Juwei Group was established was because CEO Ju wanted to give it to her. It was obvious that Du Cici had lied about this matter. She had never seen Bailey Jiaju before, let alone having a meal with him. Everything was just a lie that she made up for her own vanity. Regardless of whether it was the male or female students, even Professor Yuan, they frowned and looked at Du Cici. Du Cici's face turned pale when she was stared at by those gazes. It shouldn't be like this. How did things turn out like this? She had never been so embarrassed before. Even standing had become a kind of torture. If only a few people knew about this matter, she could just walk away. However, this was a class reunion. Not only were there her old classmates, but many of them were in the same line of work as her. Her tutor was also there. If today's matter were to spread, she would definitely become a joke. It would be a huge joke. This was a loss of reputation that was even more unbearable than death. In the beginning, she and Li Meng had planned to embarrass Hellion Vivian here. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Du Cici's face was red. She reached out and tugged at Li Meng's sleeve, wanting her to say a few words for her. Li Meng did not move. She was still digesting the series of events. She knew that Du Cici was usually very vain. However, she did not think that there was anything wrong with being vain. Therefore, she was willing to cooperate with Du Cici. Both of them were sisters, so their thoughts were the same. However, she did not expect that the poor man they were mocking was the CEO of Juwei Group. What should I do? What should I do now? Chapter 971. Li Meng panicked. She opened her mouth but did not know what to say. Left with no choice, Du Cici could only turn her head and ask the few female students who had been following her and fawning over her to say something. However, those people were obviously worse than Li Meng. They avoided Du Cici's gaze, trying to reduce their presence as much as possible. Bailey Shangxia looked at the scene and slowly sneered. Auntie, I told you from the beginning that lies will be very ugly when they are exposed. Du Cici did not know who to look at. She only realized how wrong she was. She did not expect that she would be caught red-handed just because she said something a little too big as usual. How was she going to clean up this mess? You want to be the lady boss? Bailey Shangxia's little face was very cool and his words were very cold. At such a young age he seemed to be able to make decisions. What a joke. The legal person of Juwei Group is not my father but my mother. My father is just an employee. Although it was not the right time to say this, as a younger brother who knew his brother very well, Qingchen could hear the disdain in Bailey Shangxia's words towards his father. But legal person? Qingchen was no stranger to this word. Her big eyes looked at Hellion Vivian as if to ask, "When did you become the legal person?" Hellion Vivian also wanted to know, so she simply turned to His Highness, who was still destroying the enemy, and asked, "When did I become the legal person of Ju Wei Group?" "This morning." Beligaju felt that at this time, seeing this face would greatly reduce his lethality. He directly pulled her away and said, "Betrothal gift." "Oh," Hellion Weiwei replied. Then she turned around and said to little Qingchen, "He said it's a betrothal gift, but I'm not very interested in the film company. What if it goes bankrupt?" "It's okay." Qingchen said very cutely, "We can sell it when the time comes." "Sell it?" The hotel manager who was listening at the side was confused. "Little young master, do you know how profitable Ju Wei Group is? Do you know how much Ju Wei Group's stock price has skyrocketed? How could he have the thought of selling it? Madam is such a beautiful and intelligent person, she will definitely not agree." With this thought in mind, the hotel manager looked at Hellion Vivian with sparkling eyes. Hellion Vivian seemed to think about it for a while. She looked very serious, as though she was rejecting the idea. However, to the person in charge's surprise, she actually smiled and said brightly, "Son, this is a really good idea." The hotel manager. "How is this idea good?" Bailey Shangxia glanced at the hotel manager coolly. "You don't think Qingchen's idea is good?" The person in charge of the hotel originally wanted to say what was in his heart, but in this line of work, the most important thing was to be very observant, so when the words came to his mouth, he immediately changed his mind. "I think this idea is very good. That's right, very good." Sob, 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 I'm about to cry. Bailey Shangxia nodded in satisfaction and warned him seriously, "Qingchen's idea is good." "Yes, yes." The hotel manager thought to himself, "This devil young master who is obsessed with his brother is really crazy." After such a commotion, the hostility in Beligaju's eyes finally subsided. He looked at Hellion Vivian helplessly and sighed in his heart, but there was no expression on his face. "Come here." Hellion Vivian walked over with a smile, only to hear him ask in a low voice, "You don't want me to kill anyone? There's no need to let the other party die, it's too bloody." Hellion Vivian was telling the truth. Although she was not a kind person, she had noticed the unstable hostility in His Highness from the beginning. She did not know if it was because of the tearing of time and space. From her point of view, she did not care what kind of punishment Du Cece would receive. She was also a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. What she cared about was the man in front of her. If she could not kill him, then she would. Beligaju looked at the pair of smiling eyes. He never believed that good would be rewarded with good and evil would be repaid with evil, so he looked down on gods and Buddhas. When reading poems, there would always be such a sentence: "Quiet is the style of a gentleman, restrained and silent, silent and peaceful." He rarely explicitly opposed something, and his thoughts were always hidden in his heart. However, he was not a modest gentleman. In order to get what he wanted, he had been using schemes and tricks all along the way. He did not think that schemes were a derogatory term. Schemes and tricks were all desirable as long as he could get what he wanted in the end. No matter what method he used, it was all the same. Since she did not want him to kill, then he would not kill. However, he still wanted to destroy the Du family inch by inch. Beligaju turned around and glanced at Du Cece. The smile on his face had faded away, and it was replaced by a coldness that came from his bones. He only curled his lips slightly, but he did not directly deal with Du Cece. Instead, he said to the person in charge of the hotel, "Go and tell Qing Long to hand in all the evidence of the Du family's bribery over the years. Since she is staying in the courtyard, then get her down. I can't stand people who are arrogant in front of me the most." He said it in a very casual manner. However, Du Cece could not stay any longer. She pushed the chair away and said loudly, Are you trying to destroy the Du family? You can't do that." Beligaju smiled perfectly, but his eyes were so cold that it seemed like there were knives hidden in them. "Miss Du, you are so good at making up stories. You almost made Wei Wei think that I had an affair, and even my son wanted to run away from home with his mother and younger brother. You are trying to destroy my family, so why can't I let the Du family go down a dead end?" Du Cece knew this man's ability. She had always known that he had the ability to rule over a city. That was why she was so proud when her uncle said that he wanted to introduce her to this man. The Du family would definitely not have a good ending in his hands. Thinking of this, Du Cece turned her head and tried to lower herself. Her face was full of tears. Wei, we are all old classmates. Don't be so ruthless. If I knew that your boyfriend was Co Ju, I would never have said those words. I really never thought of destroying anything. She believed that as long as she said that, there would be a chance for her to survive. Hellion Vivian had to at least consider the situation now. If she was too ruthless in a class reunion, it would not look good on anyone. You don't have the ability to destroy, but it's not that you never thought of it. Hellion Wei's gaze was indifferent as she stood against the light. I've always disliked anyone who has designs on my man. So do Cece stop acting. You're not as innocent as you make yourself out to be when you're lying about my man. The last sentence made Du Cece, who was still thinking that she could get away with it, completely freeze. Chapter 972. Everyone present was a student of the law. Basically, everyone understood the meaning behind Hellion Vivian's words without much thought. Du Cece was obviously trying to seduce him, but now that she was exposed, she said that she didn't do it on purpose. Thinking of this relationship, the surrounding students looked at Du Cece with condemnation instead of awkwardness. Basically, anyone who didn't follow such a woman would hate her, regardless of how powerful and influential she was or whether she was an old classmate. Everyone would hate this kind of woman from the bottom of their hearts. After all, anyone would be wary of a woman with the potential to be a mistress. Du Cece didn't expect that her words of retreating to advance would not help her break free from the situation just now. Instead, she fell into an even more embarrassing situation because of Hellion Vivian's words. Du Cece looked at the surrounding people sizing her up. Her face was so red that she couldn't stay there any longer. Biting her thin lips, she ran out of the private room in a panic. Outside the Emperor Hotel, she didn't know who called in the reporters, but they surrounded her in the middle. Miss Du, I heard that your law firm deliberately lost the case after accepting it just to help some black-hearted businessmen bully the migrant workers. Is that true? Don't you feel uneasy by always helping such people? Miss Du, please answer the question. Have you ever thought about those who have difficulties in getting money? When they finally gathered enough money to sue these black-hearted businessmen, you used the dirtiest means to block their only hope. Don't you feel guilty at all? As a lawyer, you accepted money and deliberately lost the case. Isn't this against the most basic professional ethics? Du Cece didn't expect to face such questions as soon as she stepped out of the hotel. Because she was caught off guard, she froze on the spot. Her pale face was exposed. No one should know what she did. Those stupid migrant workers didn't know anything. After the case was over, they even sent her smelly local specialties, saying that they were grateful to her even if they lost the case. Who was it that exposed this to the reporters? No matter how well Du Cece hid it, her spoiled temper was still there. She screamed and threw her bag on the ground like a shrew. Shut up, all of you. All of you shut up. This scene completely destroyed the image that Du Cece had worked so hard to maintain. There was a TV in the luxurious private room. It was the clearest live broadcast. Many students couldn't help but shake their heads and sigh in their hearts. Hellion Vivian poked the man sitting next to her and said in a low voice, "You've been holding back for this scene, haven't you?" "How could that be?" Baligaju laughed. His eyes were filled with the dark aura unique to demons. If she didn't claim to be the mistress of the Ju Wei group, she wouldn't have to embarrass herself. Besides, I don't like to make things difficult for a woman. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. When did His Highness become so kind? He added with a smile, if you want to make things difficult for them, then make things difficult for their entire family. Hellion Vivian, Li Meng was still trying to clear Du Cece's name. I didn't expect Du Cece to be so stupid. Professor Yuan looked directly at her. For the first time his voice was filled with displeasure. This isn't called stupid. This is called asking for it. If anyone dares to do such a thing in the future, don't say that you graduated from a university. Not only will you embarrass the university, but you will also embarrass your classmates. Accepting bribes and purposely losing the case. This is the worst lawyer I've ever seen. In the United States, if this kind of thing is exposed, you will go to jail, Robert said seriously. It was not difficult to see that he was against this matter. The smile on Li Meng's face froze after being slapped in the face by the two most authoritative people. She could only shut her mouth obediently. However, she didn't expect that when she raised her head she would meet Bailey Jiaju's gaze. It was so deep that it made people's hearts beat faster. He curled his thin lips at her. That kind of smile could make anyone fall for him. Li Meng had always boasted that she was good-looking. Even after she got married, she was pursued by many men. After all, she was petite, had fair skin, and was very particular about her dressing. Moreover, her current situation and expression made her look a little pitiful. She looked back at Beligaju with a pitiful gaze. She looked like she wanted to say something but stopped herself. Li Meng did not think that she was wrong because she was not the one who made up the lie. At most, she just wanted to teach Hellion Vivian a lesson. Therefore, even if something happened, it would not spread to her. What's more, she raised her head and looked at Bailey Jiaju again. Every man had a tender heart. Moreover, the man smiled at her just now. Thinking of this, Li Meng could not help but have other thoughts in her mind. She looked at Beligaju again. At this time, the other students had already started to order their food. After all, it was not easy to have a gathering, so they would not disperse just like that. However, the atmosphere was obviously not as lively as before. Everyone lowered their heads to study the menu, so no one saw this scene. Even Hellion Vivian was worried about what to eat. For a foodie like her, eating was indeed something worth worrying about. The two little ones sat on two small chairs. Bailey Shangxie reached out and pressed the menu for Qingchen, allowing her to choose whatever she wanted. There was no doubt that he was a young master. He instructed the person in charge to get a glass of milk for his younger brother first. He tested the temperature first before feeding Qingchen the cup. He raised his head and saw this scene. His little mouth moved coolly and he only spat out 2 words. Stupid. Inexplicably, Qingchen did not know who her older brother was talking about. She raised her little head from the menu. Bailey Shangxie pressed down the stray hair on his younger brother's head and reached out to touch Qingchen. His little face was still cool. It's okay. Continue to order what you want to eat. You can also order what isn't on the menu. I'll get them to buy it. The person in charge was speechless. He was indeed a brother Khan. He had never seen the devil young master speak so much and so patiently to anyone. Under normal circumstances, the standard was 1 to 2 words. For example, scram, annoying and stupid. When such a child first went to the company, everyone thought that Co Ju used to be a gangster. This was because the devil young master was too similar to the Italian mafia. The aura he exuded did not belong to an ordinary 3-year-old boy at all. Moreover, this child's IQ was very high. He was able to play around with adults like them. Whenever he said the word, stupid, it meant that someone was going to be unlucky. Chapter 973. Li Meng didn't notice the danger. She was still thinking about how to ease the tension between them. She should be able to get closer to that man during the toast. Beligaju smiled again, but the evil aura around him was getting stronger. Hellion Vivian looked up in confusion. What's wrong? Nothing. Beligaju held little Phoenix's left hand and held it in his palm. Hellion Vivian followed him and pointed at the menu with her right hand. Grilled beef fillet, your favorite. Do you want it? I don't want to eat beef today. Beligaju's voice was very calm. It's just ordinary meat. You don't have to do anything with it. Just throw it into your mouth and eat a few bites. It's not interesting. Hellion Vivian skipped this dish and put her finger on the lobster. What about this dish? Spicy. It should be very appetizing. You can peel it before eating. It's troublesome to peel it. Beligaju put one hand behind Hellion Vivian's chair. Their posture was very natural, but there was an indescribable intimacy between them. Hellion Vivian smiled and poked his face. I'll peel it for you. Do you want it? Okay. Bailey Jiaju smiled for real this time. There was only gentleness left in his pair of long and narrow eyes. The person in charge was stunned. He didn't expect Co Ju to be like this when he was in a relationship. How should he put it? He was beating around the bush just to let his wife peel the lobster for him. This was a little shameless. Bailey Shangxie was used to his father's shamelessness. He didn't even look at them. He handed the chopsticks and spoon to Qingchen. Then he stood there and lowered his head to tie a napkin for his younger brother. He looked very serious. Professor Yuan smiled. Oh, you taught these 2 kids well. Come, tell Grandpa, what do you want to do when you grow up? Make money. When Qingchen said these 2 words, she was very much like a little gentleman. She was still holding the milk that her brother gave her, and her voice was soft and cold. Professor Yuan paused for a moment. Make money? Yes. Qingchen said seriously. Big Brother is going to be an actress in the future. This is very expensive and there will be many people who will take advantage of him. In order to let Big Brother focus on being an actress, I have to work hard to earn money so that I can prevent him from being taken advantage of. Professor Yuan. Is this considered a career goal? Also, is it really good for you to know about the unspoken rules at such a young age? And who the hell is that actress? Bailey Shangxia's little face was very cool, but there were too many things going on in his heart. For example, no child in the world was as sensible, well-behaved and considerate as his little brother, etc. The person in charge calmly understood the demon young master's thoughts from the smile on his face. For the nth time he wanted to put his hand on his forehead. Although it's not the right time to talk about this, but little young master, do you think anyone would dare to follow the rules of the little young master devil? They would be completely silenced. Bailey Shangxia ignored the person in charge's complaints and took a tissue to wipe Qingqin's mouth. He still felt that his little brother was very considerate, so he simply hugged Qingqin's little head and kissed it. That action was so cute. The female students excitedly tugged at Hellion Vivian's hand. Wei, why are your two sons so obedient? Ours are not. They hit each other when they see each other. Tell us, how did you teach them? You should teach them to us too. Speaking of this, Hellion Vivian still felt guilty because in her memory, Qingqin had never needed her to teach him. He had always been very obedient. As for Shangxia, other than the fact that he liked to eat humans when he was hungry, he was very responsible the rest of the time. Therefore, Hellion Vivian had no choice but to put the issue of education aside. Shangxia has always been taken care of by Jiaju. Jiaju still has time to take care of a child? Li Meng's eyes widened as she looked at Beligaju with watery eyes. This is really unexpected. I should ask my old Qing to take a good look at him. He usually does business with Jiaju, but he doesn't learn how to teach a child. Bailey Jiaju's fingers were still entwined with Hellion Wei Wei's long hair, while his other hand casually wiped the corner of his lips. His voice was slow and it was unusually pleasing to the ears. Don't worry, he will see it very soon. Hearing such a voice, Li Meng couldn't help but blush. She wanted to see more of Beligaju. However, she realized that the person in charge was standing there. She didn't know if it was intentional or not, but he blocked her view just like that. Li Meng was angry, but it was fine. When her old Qing came later, they would definitely be able to talk. Counting the time, her old Qing should be here by now. Wasn't it just taking Qingqing to the bathroom? Why did he take so long? The dishes were about to be served. Li Meng took out her phone and wanted to make a call to urge him. The door of the private room was pushed open. Her husband walked in with little fatty Qing in his arms. Just as he was about to complain that there were too many people outside and it wasn't easy for him to come in, he saw the man sitting at the dining table. In just an instant, his expression changed from gloomy to cheerful. I was wondering why there were so many reporters outside. It turns out that Sioju is here. Sioju, you are? I'm here for dinner. Beligaju's voice was very calm and the corners of his mouth were curled into a smile. Li Meng was very good at seizing the opportunity. She pulled her husband over and didn't even introduce Hellion Vivian. Instead she said to him, Old Qing, you see, this is fate. Shouldn't we toast Sioju? Of course, of course. Old Qing picked up the wine glass on his seat without hesitation and led his son and wife toward Beligaju. Qingqin and Bailey Shangxia were sitting beside Beligaju, blocking little Fatty Cheng's path. Little Fatty Cheng was very arrogant. He didn't dare to provoke Bailey Shangxia, but he felt that he had made Qingqin suffer before this. Naturally, he became fearless. He scolded Qingqin in a low voice, Little country bumpkin, get out of my way. Bam. Bailey Shangxia didn't even give the surrounding people time to react. He grabbed little Fatty Cheng by the collar and pressed him on the table with one hand. Although he was small, the smile on his face was bloodthirsty. Who are you calling a country bumpkin? I dare you to call me that again. Everyone was stunned by Bailey Shangxia's action. Li Meng was the first to react. What happened? Shangxia, what's wrong? Did my Qingqing make you unhappy? Let me apologize to you on behalf of my Qingqing, okay? She could tell from the beginning that Bailey Shangxia was the closest to Sioju. She had to let Qingqing build a good relationship with him. Qingqing was also very scared. He was actually a coward. He had always bullied people in school because of his family's power. He didn't know that Bailey Shangxia and Qingqin were brothers. Little Fatty Cheng's memory was still stuck in the impression that these two people didn't get along well. Therefore he didn't expect that the one who flipped out at him would be Bailey Shangxie. Chapter 974. Shangxie, I wasn't talking about you. In order to prove that he was telling the truth, Little Fatty Cheng pointed his finger at Qingchen and said, I was talking about him. Really, I was talking about him. Qingchen was still drinking milk when Little Fatty Cheng pointed his finger at her. Her eyes were big and she looked like a cute kitten. Hellion Vivian smiled and wiped her son's mouth. Then she looked at Little Fatty Cheng and said, So the news I received was not wrong. In school you often said that Qingchen was a country bumpkin. So what if I did? Little Fatty Cheng snorted. He looked down on this mechanic. Suddenly, the private room fell into an indescribable silence because of this conversation. Li Meng knew that things were going to go south when Little Fatty Cheng pointed at Qingchen. She wanted to cover her son's mouth but she could not do so from where she was standing. She could only explain to Hellion Vivian, Wait, isn't this matter over? Qingchen, country bumpkin? Before Li Meng could finish her sentence, Baligaju interrupted her. His voice was very noble. He looked up and did not look at anyone but Little Fatty Cheng. He said, Manager Cheng, so this is how your son bullied my son. Bullied Xiao Ju's son? Little Fatty Cheng was still confused and did not understand what the man was talking about. However, he knew that even if he was given 100 guts, he would not dare to provoke a devil. Xiao, is there a misunderstanding? The man with the surname Cheng opened his mouth. Li Meng immediately said, It's a misunderstanding. Everything is a misunderstanding. I thought this misunderstanding was over. Before you came, Wei Wei and I had already reached an agreement. It was just a quarrel between children. It's nothing serious. Bailey Shangxia's face was very cold. It was so cold that it sent chills down one's spine. You bullied my brother and you still say it's nothing serious? Andy, what do you mean by quarrel? If it was really a quarrel, would your Little Fatty Cheng still be so arrogant? The Cheng family, right? Speaking of this, he raised his little face and glanced at Mr. Cheng. His little face was cold. You and your uncle don't have to go to the villa. Go back and tell your uncle that from today onwards, Ju Wei Group will launch an all-out attack on the Cheng Group. He better stay alive until the end. After hearing this, the man surnamed Cheng was completely stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. Li Meng did not expect things to turn out this way. She bit her lip and looked at Baligaju. She felt that since she had caught his eye, he would not be so heartless. Xiaoju, this is such a big matter. How can you let a child make the decision, right? Unfortunately, she didn't know Baligaju at all and she didn't know why the man was looking at her just now. The demon's revenge had always been ruthless. Indeed, we shouldn't let a child make decisions. Baligaju twirled the goblet in his hand casually. After all, the Li family is involved in this matter. The last word, Li family, made Li Meng's expression change. You won't do this, Xiaoju. Didn't you want to see how I teach my child? Baligaju leaned back and released all his domineering aura at this moment. Now you've seen it. And, the way you looked at me just now was really disgusting. Manager Cheng, you can throw away the woman you married. What did he mean by the way he looked at her? Needless to say, everyone more or less understood. After all, there was something wrong with Li Meng's behavior just now. She ignored Hellion Vivian and toasted Baligaju alone. At first, everyone thought that she was just trying to curry favor with Baligaju. Now that Baligaju mentioned it, they guessed her true intentions. This woman was too unruly. The students present more or less did not want to look at her anymore. They only looked at Manager Cheng with pity. Manager Cheng was also someone who had been in the business world for a long time. When he heard what Li Meng said, his face turned even greener than if he had eaten a worm. Li Meng still wanted to say something. However, Manager Cheng had already pulled her back and gave her a furious slap. Li Meng's face was almost disfigured by this slap. She loved to show off how well her husband treated her in front of her classmates. She could not stand those who were still unmarried. Even when Hellion Vivian did not explicitly say that she had a boyfriend, she would intentionally or unintentionally spread the news in front of others. She just wanted to say that there was something wrong with Hellion Vivian's way of doing things. But now it was clear who the one with the wrong way of doing things was. Little Fatty Cheng, who was standing at the side, was scared out of his wits. He didn't understand why his father was so angry. He just stood there trembling. Even when his mother, who was the one who protected him the most, was beaten, he didn't say a word. Professor Yuan, who was standing at the side, saw clearly that this child was very rude and unreasonable when it came to bullying his peers. However, he was extremely cowardly when it came to his family. There was no saving him. No one in this family, from old to young, could compare to Hellion Vivian's family. Indeed, no one was more obsessed with his younger brother than Bailey Shangxie. When he thought of little Fatty Cheng's reaction just now, he was filled with anger. Bailey Shangxie glanced at the person in charge beside him and said coolly, "Throw this family out. Also, tell the reporters outside that Ju Wei Group will announce a new successor in 3 days." A new successor? The person in charge looked in the direction of his boss. When he saw that Beligage's expression did not change at all, he could only ask meekly, "Who is it?" Bailey Shangxie did not beat around the bush. He carried his younger brother forward and said coolly, "Him." The person in charge's mouth twitched as he met Qingchen's eyes. He reached out and held his head. He had a premonition that there would be a bloodbath in Ju Wei Group. "Little young master, you're so obsessed with your younger brother." This time, Li Meng tasted humiliation that she had never tasted before. She was chased out of the hotel like this. Her husband was cursing and swearing at her as he walked away, demanding a divorce. She was just reaping what she sowed. Bailey Shangxie retracted his gaze from the family and carefully placed Qingchen back on the chair. His younger brother was drinking his milk obediently. Who did he offend? Why did he call Qingchen a country bumpkin for no reason? If mother was not here, he would have gone on a killing spree and crushed all their souls. A bunch of stupid humans. However, he had just estimated that the punch would be enough to make little Fatty Ching suffer for a week. Little Fatty Ching was indeed in a lot of pain. This brat's first reaction was to call his grandfather and complain. Chapter 975. Although little Fatty was a coward, he had learned from his mother. He could hit others, but others could not hit him. He made this call behind Li Meng's back. This was because little Fatty Ching was scared out of his wits when he walked out of the hotel. His father kept saying that he wanted to divorce his mother. He had never seen his father so angry before. Little Fatty Ching cried when the call went through. He said that his parents were fighting and that he was bullied by his classmates. He wanted his grandfather to help him. Everyone knew that the Li family only had one daughter, so his grandson was Li Qingzhu's treasure. As soon as he heard that his grandson was bullied, Li Qingzhu immediately couldn't stand it. He was originally in charge of education, so of course his temper was not small. "Tell Grandpa, is the child who bullied you the country bumpkin you mentioned last time?" Little Fatty Ching kept saying, "Yes." He cried until he hiccuped. Li Qingzhu scolded him in a low voice and said, "Qingqing, tell me where you are. I will ask someone to pick you up. Are your parents still there?" "Yes, sob sob sob. Emperor Hotel. Grandpa, come quickly." Little Fatty Ching cried and hung up the phone. He wanted to return the punch to his face. His mother had told him that if it was his grandfather, he would definitely make sure that all of them could not go to school. Even if they were rich, they would not be able to win against an official. Li Qingzhu stared at his phone that had been hung up on. He immediately called the kindergarten and reprimanded the principal. Only then did he feel a little better. However, his voice was still unhappy. "I'm telling you, I'm transferring that Hellion Qingchen guy to another school today. What kind of students are you taking in? He has no manners at all." The principal kept apologizing, but he still did his duty. "Is there a misunderstanding between the two kids? Why don't I ask Qingchen to apologize to Qingqing?" "Principal Dong, children can be forgiven if they make a mistake once or twice. However, if they make too many mistakes, I, as a deputy minister, will doubt whether you are fit to be in your current position." Li Qingzhu was obviously using his status to pressure the principal. After he finished speaking, he did not wait for the principal to reply and hung up the phone. He believed that the other party would weigh the pros and cons of this matter. How could a little country bumpkin compare with his Qingqing? He should check if he was qualified. Li Qingzhu stood up from his chair and was about to go out to pick up his grandson when the phone on the table rang again. He did not pay much attention to it. He thought it was Principal Dong. He picked up the phone. "Have you decided? Fire him as soon as possible." Deputy Minister Li. A familiar chuckle came from the microphone. Every word was oppressive to the listener's nerves. "Who do you want to fire?" Li Qingzhu's eyes suddenly shook and his voice became unsteady. To young Master Tang. Heh. The man casually rested his slender legs on the desk. The light shone through the large floor-to-ceiling window onto his well-ironed military boots, looking unusually sharp. I just received a piece of information from the Ju Wei group today about you accepting bribes. Originally, I wanted to wait for 2 or 3 days before taking action, but your attitude inexplicably made me want to push the schedule forward. Li Qingzhu's lips turned pale. No, young Master Tang, listen to me. You thought it was Principal Dong who called you? The man interrupted his stuttering. He played with a thin cigarette with his fingers. He seemed to be smiling, but his eyes were cold. Li Qingzhu, don't you know that Helian Qingchen is under the Tang sect's protection? Oh right, you don't seem to know, but it doesn't matter. As long as I know that your grandson often calls him a country bumpkin and you want Principal Dong to fire him, it's fine. A bolt from the blue. Li Qingzhu fell back into the wooden chair. When he looked up again, someone had already handcuffed him. He had always known that anyone who fell into the hands of the Tang sect would not have a good ending. But he didn't know that anyone who provoked His Highness would basically be destroyed. In the office, the man tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He smiled and instructed the person beside him, "Go and reply to Suju. Tell him that I hope our future cooperation can be as pleasant. Also, tell him that it's impossible to guard against a love rival at a class reunion. When a fox befriended a demon, the degree of black-bellied was often double." Beligaju looked at the message on his phone. When he saw the word love rival, he raised his eyebrows. "Why aren't you eating?" Helian Vivian was still working hard to peel crayfish. When she looked up, she saw that His Highness had stopped. His handsome face seemed a little cold. Beligaju smiled and held Helian Vivian's hand. He opened his mouth and ate the crayfish. His voice was low. "Nothing. I was afraid that you would be tired from peeling crayfish." "I'm not tired." Helian Vivian lowered her voice and whispered in his ear, "This is what an arms tycoon should do. But can you eat the ones on the plate that are already peeled? Don't bite my finger so often. Our classmates are watching. It's not good." That way Bailey Jiaju could almost see the wagging tail behind her back. Therefore his little phoenix often confused her position, which was also a very wonderful thing. "Vivian, let me toast to you." Xiao Zifeng stood up from his chair. He was good-looking and even his posture was eye-catching. The corner of his mouth was very gentle, and there were too many emotions brewing in his deep eyes. "If anyone treats you badly in the future, you can come and find me at any time." Helian Vivian choked on the crayfish in her mouth. Why did this sound a little weird? However, Helian Vivian could still feel the kindness shown by the other party. She also stood up and was about to speak with the wine glass in her hand. Someone put an arm around her shoulder. It was Beligaju. His smile didn't change at all and he was still as elegant as ever. "You don't have to drink this wine, Vivian, because she will never have that chance." "Is that so?" Xiao Zifeng smiled faintly and looked up. His words were very meaningful. "There are always some things in the world that people can't control. But I still wish Xiao Ju good luck." Beligaju's thin lips curled slightly. "Compared to some people who want something but can't get it, I am indeed very lucky." Xiao Zifeng's fingers tightened and he didn't say anything else. It was all because a certain His Highness words were too harsh. Helian Weiwei was at a loss as she listened at the side. She couldn't help but admit that in certain aspects she was still very slow. "I keep feeling that this Xiao Zifeng's words are weird." As soon as they sat down, Helian Vivian quietly shared her thoughts with a certain someone. After all, she was still very observant. The two little ones. Don't insult the word observant. No matter what, as long as you mention that name, Dad will definitely flip out. Chapter 976. However, what the two little ones did not expect was that Beligaju did not get angry after hearing the sharing. Instead, he laughed and began to analyze the situation seriously with Helian Vivian. His eyes shone. "Do you feel that there is hostility in his words?" Helian Vivian nodded. Beligaju let out a long sigh. "Obviously, he doesn't want us to grow old together, just like your female classmates just now." "But why?" Helian Vivian did not understand. "When we were in school, he was quite nice to me." "Quite nice." Bailey Jiaju's hand tightened. He didn't care about the change in shape of the napkin in his palm at all. On the contrary, the more he smiled, the more charming he became. "Probably it's because of me." You should be able to understand that my appearance always brings a lot of unnecessary troubles. You mean? Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. I understand. Beligaju wiped the corner of his mouth. I think I should make it clearer. No need. Hellion Vivian held his hand very overbearingly. She looked at Xiao Zifeng, who was not far away, and shook her head pitifully. Why didn't I think of it before? When we were in school, he didn't have a girlfriend. I heard that he hasn't been in a relationship until now. So this is the reason why. The two little ones looked at each other and then began to whisper, Brother, the reason that Hellion Vivian thinks of can't be what I think it is, right? It's very possible. Dad is too shameless. Usually when he blackmails someone, he's very ruthless. Bailey Shangxie had a cool expression on his little face. He felt more and more that he should keep his younger brother away from his father. The telepathy between the three of them was very accurate. Beligaju could not be more clear about what the two little ones were thinking. He gave his two sons a warning look and then retracted his gaze. His voice was very calm, as if he was stating a very normal thing. Vivian, this is a man's private matter after all. He probably doesn't want others to know. Don't worry, I understand. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she put the piece of beef that His Highness had given her into her mouth. She continued in a low voice. Actually, it's normal for men to like men nowadays. He doesn't have to suppress himself at all. The two little ones, as expected. His Highness was very satisfied with Hellion Vivian's conclusion. He smiled and fed his little phoenix. Although the beginning of the meal was a little dramatic, the people who came to attend the class reunion were very happy after that. What's more, the Emperor Sky Hotel even specially made a cake for them. The cake was actually filled with all of their names. Professor Yuan was a good teacher. He treated all of his students very well. At the end of the session, he reached out and patted them on the shoulder. He had a gratified expression on his face that said, "My child has grown up." Originally, Robert wanted to catch up with Hellion Vivian. However, after observing the situation just now, his intuition as a lawyer told him that he should not strike up a conversation with Vivian in front of a certain man. Therefore, Robert cleverly chose to retreat with Professor Yuan. Some students wanted to stay and continue singing. It was rare for them to be so happy. Xiao Zifeng looked at the woman standing in the crowd and chuckled wantonly. He felt that he had to make a final effort no matter what. Although he had already decided to give them his blessings. However, if he could make that man feel uneasy at the end, he should know how to cherish Vivian more. Xiao Zifeng looked up and pressed the cigarette in his hand into the ashtray. Then he walked over to Hellion Vivian. Can we talk in private? After His Highness's advice just now, Hellion Vivian's feelings towards Xiao Zifeng were very complicated. She struggled for a few seconds before she nodded generously. At that time, Beligaju was signing the bill. The person in charge had brought it over. If the bill was waived, it had to be personally signed by the president. However, the two little ones were very confused. Why didn't their father stop them from talking in private? Dad, you don't want to tell me that you're showing off your gentlemanly demeanor right now? In Bailey Shangxie's mind, his father had always been sinister and cunning. There was no gentleman to speak of at all. Beligaju sat there with his legs slightly crossed. He placed the high-end fountain pen that felt very good on the table and said slowly, "What's wrong? Is it strange?" "It's very strange." Qingchen nodded. She hugged the devil plushie and approached Beligaju. She stared at her father with her big eyes, trying to figure out something from him. Beligaju smiled. His fingers lazily supported his chin. His eyes flashed slightly. Someone wants to make him completely give up. This little time alone can still be given to him. Bailey Shangxie couldn't guess his father's thoughts. He simply turned his head and held his brother's hand. He decided to personally see what his mother and that guy with the surname Xiao were talking about. It was very easy for the two little ones to hide. As long as they squatted there like little mushrooms, they could basically hear the conversation in the corridor. Wei Wei. Xiao Zifeng looked at the starry sky outside the corridor. The corners of his mouth were gentle, and even his voice was lower than usual. There's something that I've thought about for a long time and decided to tell you. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. She thought to herself, is it coming just like that? When Xiao Zifeng turned around, he saw Hellion Vivian's gaze. Although he didn't understand why she was so excited, he felt that this was the person he had always liked. Until now she hadn't changed. She clearly had a queen-like face, but for some reason she always gave off a hairy feeling. Just say what you want to say. Hellion Vivian felt that at this time she should enlighten him. But don't force yourself. Okay. Xiao Zifeng stared at those beautiful eyes that were like stars. He could clearly hear the sound of his own heartbeat. He had overestimated himself and couldn't help but like her. Actually, Hellion Vivian was a secret agent. She could clearly feel the strong uneasiness in the other party. Her heart softened in the end and she softly interrupted him. I know what you want to say. You know. Xiao Zifeng was shocked and his eyes started to shake. Hellion Vivian solemnly replied with a then reached out and patted him on the shoulder. It's not your fault that there's something wrong with your sexual orientation. I'll keep this a secret for you. I know that you want to tell me this because you treat me as a friend. Just now, Ju also reminded me that you would probably look for me. What I mean is, no matter whether you like men or women, as long as you don't steal my man, I'll be your friend and support you. You're touched. Hellion Vivian thought proudly. She finally had good friends in school. In the past they were all her good buddies. The school hunk Xiao really thought so highly of himself. His Highness was right. The two little ones were speechless. Chapter 977. Xiao Zifeng was petrified when he heard Hellion Vivian's words. He wanted to explain himself. However, it was obvious that Hellion Weiwei was too considerate. She merely said, "You don't have to say anything else, I understand." Even his escape route was blocked. In the end, Xiao Zifeng could only look at Hellion Vivian. He reached out his hand and pressed the stray hair in front of his forehead. He seemed to be smiling, but more than that he said helplessly, "Hellion Vivian, you don't have to be too touched." Hellion Vivian patted his shoulder seriously again. Xiao Zifeng almost vomited blood when he heard that. "You think I'm touched? Aren't you touched? Then why do you look like you're about to cry?" Hellion Vivian sighed after she finished speaking. The hearts of the people below are so fragile. I understand. Xiao Zifeng's expression began to crack. The ones below? Don't you guys have a hierarchy when you're with other guys? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. You don't have to be so surprised. There are many overseas. I've seen them all. Xiao Zifeng was about to break down. What have you seen? Who said that I'm the one below? Not the one below? Then you're the one above. Hellion Vivian shook her head pitifully. Then why do you keep looking at you? Even if I'm not here, you won't be able to suppress him. Xiao Zifeng was speechless. He had never thought of suppressing a guy, okay? I don't. Xiao Zifeng wanted to clear the misunderstanding. Mr. Xiao. A graceful and elegant voice sounded from the corner. The man stood there holding Bailey Shangxie with one hand. He looked at him with an elegant smile. Sorry, I didn't want to disturb you guys. However, he's sleepy and wants to look for Hellion Vivian. Bailey Shangxie's eyes lit up. He did not look sleepy at all. However, due to the Great Demon King's lowered gaze, he could only stretch out his little paw and rub his face, pretending to be very tired. He snorted coldly in his heart. Using me as an excuse again, there is no such thing as the most shameless imperial father, only more shameless. Of course, Xiao Zifeng knew that the man did it on purpose. Especially after talking to Hellion Vivian, he realized how cunning the man was. He wanted to say something to Hellion Vivian, but Vivian obviously thought that the conversation was over. Even after everyone left, he sent a message to Hellion Vivian to explain that he did not like men. Hellion Vivian only replied, "Don't worry, I won't say anything." In short, she was sure that he liked men. Xiao Zifeng did not give up. He lowered his head and began to type word by word. At this moment, in the busiest villa area in the capital, Baligaju looked at the person in his arms who had just replied to his WeChat message and was waiting for the next one. A cold light flashed in his deep eyes. He then said nonchalantly, "Vivian." Yes. Hellion Vivian looked up with a biscuit in her mouth. Baligaju smiled faintly. "There's marinated beef in the fridge on the first floor. Are you hungry?" Marinated beef. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. Baligaju curved his thin lips. "That's right. It's marinated beef. I'll eat it." Hellion Vivian immediately stood up and was very happy. "I didn't expect that there would be marinated beef in this cold place. I'll go down and get it now." Baligaju closed the business magazine in his hand and said faintly, "I'll hold the phone for you." Help me get a glass of red wine while you're at it. Hellion Vivian was only smiling at the marinated beef. She smiled and threw the phone to someone. Then she stretched and went downstairs like a cat that had just gotten food. At that time, Bailey Shangxie was playing with blocks with his younger brother. When Hellion Wei Wei came downstairs, he curled his lips coolly and said, "I don't remember there being any spiced beef in the fridge." Other than wine and blood, there was nothing else in the fridge. Bailey Jiaju did not pay attention to his son's provocation. He leisurely picked up the teacup by his hand and lowered his head to take a sip. His slender fingers slid open the phone screen and looked at the new message. Wait, maybe you'll never know. There was a person who was supposed to be studying business, but because he saw you in a debate, he transferred to a university's law department. At that time, you always came to class alone. You liked to sit by the window and look out the window. It's easy to like you. Maybe it's because I'm too conceited. I thought that you would notice me as long as I sat behind you. But other than academic discussions, you rarely turn around to look at me. So when I saw you smile at me for the first time, I knew that I was the one who had fallen for you. Yeah, I like you. Although it's too late to say this now, I still want to tell you that if he doesn't treat you well, you can look for me anytime. Bailey Jiaju looked at the WeChat messages that were sent to him one by one. His fingers paused, but he did not reply in a hurry. Instead, he waited for the other party to stop typing. After another minute, he finally typed 3 words, "She's not here." The woman he had a crush on for many years thought that he was gay. Student Hunk Zhao's heart started to cry. He sent a second message, a third message, and even a fifth one. He typed many words to confess and fidgeted uneasily. Seconds felt like years as he waited for an answer. But all he got was, "She's not here." She wasn't here. That meant that someone was using Hellion Vivian's phone. As for who this person was, it was obvious at a glance. Student Hunk Zhao was completely silent. He felt that there was no other person in the world who was more miserable than him. He just wanted to confess properly. Why was it so difficult? At this time in the villa, Hellion Wei Wei was still doubtfully sizing up the internal structure of the huge refrigerator in the kitchen. Not to mention spiced beef, there was nothing but wine and blood. There was nothing else to eat. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and didn't think much of it. Since there was no meat, she would drink more wine. Thus she took 2 wine glasses, pulled out a decent-looking red wine and walked upstairs. "There's no spiced beef in the refrigerator." Hellion Vivian asked Baligaju, "Did you remember wrongly?" Baligaju frowned as if he was really thinking. Hellion Vivian smiled and said, "You must have remembered wrongly." The 2 little ones had nothing to say about this situation and continued to play with the blocks. After playing for a while, Qingchen began to rub her eyes with her little hands. Seeing this, Bailey Shangxie picked up her little brother with difficulty and then said to Hellion Vivian coolly, "Mommy, little brother is sleepy. I'll take him to sleep." "Go ahead." Hellion Vivian looked at the swaying little figure in relief. Even her smile was gentle. Baligaju sat in his original position, swirling the wine glass in his hand with one hand and placing the other hand behind Hellion Vivian. His eyes were dark. Chapter 978. Baligaju sneered. The black thumb ring on his finger glowed as he clasped the handrail. Everyone knew that the king was not to be trifled with, but no one knew why the usually emotionless king was so cold when he woke up this morning. Even though they lived 9,000 feet below the ground, they still wanted to jump out of the villa to get some fresh air. However, in the next second, the surrounding atmosphere suddenly changed. When Baligaju saw the woman cooking in the kitchen, the corners of his mouth curled up. Even the temperature around him rose by a few degrees. The demons were so moved that they were about to cry. The Phoenix King was an angel who came to save them. "What are you doing?" Baligaju reached out and hugged his little phoenix from behind. Hellion Vivian didn't stop. She put down the kitchen knife and opened the lid of the pot. She pinched a fried bun and fed it to him. "I just made it. Eat it while it's hot. There's your favorite prawns inside." Bailey Jiaju chewed on the small fried bun that was crispy on the outside and crispy on the inside. He only felt that his whole body was warm. Although he didn't have much of a desire for human food other than his soul, it was an exception when it was made by a certain someone. "Is it good?" "Yes." "Then I'll pinch more." Hellion Vivian looked very happy. "There's nothing in the fridge. I just sent someone to buy these prawns. I only bought a little. But there's also bean and egg stuffing. Since you like beans, eat a few more before you go to the company. Baligaju ate another bun, but this time he pinched it and put it into his mouth himself. I don't have to go to the company. Don't have to go to the company. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. But today is Thursday. Baligaju's voice was very calm and unhurried. The company's day off is Thursday. Hellion Vivian. Bailey Shangxie was tying a napkin for his younger brother who was sitting at the dining table. Hearing his father's words, he couldn't stand it anymore and rolled his eyes disdainfully. His Highness seemed to have realized that his lie this time was too clumsy, so he calmly changed the topic. Why is the fried bun so small? Qingchen and Shangxie are still young. It's not convenient for them to eat big ones, but it's not easy for them to become oily if they eat small ones. Also, it's easier for them to digest. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she wrapped another small fried bun and put it into the pot. Then she covered the pot with the lid. Okay, it'll be ready in 10 minutes. I'll wrap something else. It was obvious that Bailey Jiaju did not want Hellion Weiwei to pay attention to others, even if it was his son. You don't have to go through so much trouble, those two brats can digest anything they eat. For some reason, Hellion Vivian wanted to laugh when she saw the way His Highness pursed his thin lips. She tilted her head and kissed him. Help me bring the plate up. Bailey Jiaju's mood was obviously better, but he still felt that the two little light bulbs sitting opposite him were an eyesore. Not to mention Qingchen, the most eyesore to him was his eldest son, who obviously did not need to eat human food, but still wanted to snatch the pan-fried dumplings with him. Bailey Shangxia's favorite pastime was to make his father unhappy. He knew how possessive his father was, so he deliberately ate a few more pan-fried buns. Baligaju looked at his behavior coldly and then smiled. Shangxie, you don't have to go to kindergarten today. The advertiser we worked with last time is very satisfied with you and appointed you to shoot the advertisement. Come to the company with me in the afternoon. There are some things I need to talk to you about in private. Bailey Shangxie choked on his own food. Dad, it's not good for me to be doing this at such a young age, right? Hellion Qingchen. Is there no ambiguity in this sentence? You don't want to enter the acting industry? Baligaju raised his eyebrows dangerously. Bailey Shangxie gritted his teeth. He wanted to, but he didn't want to talk to his father in private. What was the difference between that and being one-sided? I also think that Shangxie is too young. Hellion Vivian patted her eldest son's head. Isn't it too early for him to enter the acting industry? Baligaju looked at Hellion Vivian slowly. No, he's already 3 years old. It's time for him to earn money to support himself. Hellion Vivian. It was obvious that she and His Highness's definition of age were not on the same level. However, as a good brother, Bailey Shangxie reluctantly agreed when he heard that he could earn money. In the past, Bailey Shangxie had never cared about these things. However, ever since he had Qingchen, he deeply realized that he had to shoulder the heavy responsibility of supporting the family. Bailey Shangxia's definition of supporting the family was to buy delicious food for his younger brother, to buy fun things for his younger brother, and to give his younger brother a lot of money. Therefore, on that day, Bailey Shangxie arrogantly followed his father into the company. Usually, there weren't many people in the CEO's office of the Juwei Group. This made it very convenient for Baligaju to communicate with his son in a friendly manner. First, tell me how you have slandered me in front of your imperial mother. Dad, I can tell you, but can you not make me stick to the wall like this? I'm scaring away all the ghosts around me. Bailey Shangxie raised his two small arms and bared his little fangs that belonged to a demon. Bailey Jiaju was very indifferent and did not want to be long-winded. He took out his phone and opened up WeChat. Look at the phone and confess all your crimes to your mother. Also, tell her at least 3 good points about me. Otherwise, I will throw you back to the magical realm in a month's time. No matter how cool Bailey Shangxie was, he was now listless. He drooped his little head and began to repent of his crimes. Mom, I shouldn't say that Dad has had many women. In fact, he has been relying on his right hand for the past 3 years. You know how perverted he is. He thinks that everyone is dirty when he looks at them. Yes, I shouldn't say that he cheated, and I shouldn't have thought of running away from home with you and your younger brother. He asked me to tell him 3 good points about him, but I can't think of a single one even after thinking for a long time. When Hellion Vivian heard the last WeChat message, she heard a man's deep voice. Little brat, shut up. She couldn't help but laugh. Instead of replying to the message, she directly called him. What are you doing? He's feeling uneasy and is repenting. Baligaju lied without batting an eyelid. Where you now? Hellion Vivian put away the things in her hands. I'm at the car dealership. But I'm almost done here. There's nothing in the fridge at home. I'm thinking of bringing Chinchin to the supermarket later. I didn't drive when I came out today. Baligaju's gaze swept across his eldest son, who was still sticking to the corner of the wall, and the countless reporters who were standing outside the building. His thin lips slowly curved. Come and pick me up. We'll go to the supermarket together and then we'll go home. Chapter 979. I didn't drive when I came out today. Baligaju's gaze swept across his eldest son, who was still sticking close to the corner of the wall, as well as the countless reporters standing outside the building. His thin lips slowly curved into a smile. Come and pick me up. We'll go to the supermarket together, then we'll go home. Hellion Vivian did not suspect anything. Her voice was crisp. All right, I'll look for you in a while. Let's talk later. I still have something to do here. Baligaju looked at the phone that had been hung up. He did not show any signs of displeasure. Instead, the smile on his face deepened. Bailey Shangxie was still there with his arms raised. His expression was very cool. In his heart he was thinking, Juwei Group has so many cars. Any one of them could have sent Dad home. Why did he want Mom to pick him up? No matter how he thought about it, there must be a conspiracy. Could it be related to the reporters outside? A glint flashed across Bailey Shangxie's crimson eyes. Was Dad trying to? Piuju, all the reporters outside have arrived. Manager Zhang, who was in charge of corporate publicity, walked over with a smile. I just don't know what CEO Ju wants to announce. All the reporters are very excited. However, they are worried that they might ask questions that they shouldn't ask. That's why they sent me to ask CEO Ju in advance. Is there anything that CEO Ju can't talk about? Bailey Jiaju crossed his slender legs. The side of his face was handsome. There's nothing that can't be discussed because... Speaking to this point, he paused and looked up at Manager Zhang with a smile that wasn't a smile. This time what I want to announce is my private affairs. Private affairs. Manager Zhang's eyes widened. For a moment he lost his composure. One could not blame him for this reaction. One had to know that their boss had been very mysterious since the day he came to a city. He was a truly well-known figure not only in City A but also in the surrounding cities. As long as one was in the business world, there were few who did not know Baligaju. Many people racked their brains to get close to the boss. When the media heard the boss's name, they would want to get some first-hand information. However, the media did not dare to do so because they could not afford to offend this king-like man. Previously, President Du, who was in charge of publicity, had violated his boss's taboo and brought a large number of media outlets to interview him. That was why he was directly kicked out of Juwei Group and even cut off his future business path. Now, the president was actually calling for a press conference to discuss his personal matters. Manager Zhang felt that the world was a little surreal, so much so that he began to wonder if he had heard wrongly. What? Baligaju put down the pen in his hand and raised an eyebrow at him. Do you have any questions? Manager Zhang quickly shook his head. No. I'll go and get the media ready for the interview now. Manager Zhang regained his ability and experience. Kyoju, I'll go first. Baligaju nodded. Bailey Shangxie opened his mouth and said, Manager Zhang, help me find an agent. Manager Zhang stopped in his tracks in confusion. If it were any other child who had said such words, he would have definitely coaxed them with candy. However, the person who had said such words was the devilish little boss. Everyone in the upper management of the Juwei Group knew that no one could provoke this little boss. He was different from ordinary rich second-generation heirs. He did not need to rely on anyone's power to make people feel numb after seeing his means. Manager Zhang often wondered who CEO Ju had given birth to such a genius. Just by standing there, he was born to make people want to submit to him even if he was just a child. That's right, manager. Bailey Shangxie was still standing as a punishment, so he could not move his arms. He only looked at Manager Zhang and said coolly, I need a gold medal manager to help me debut. Debut? Manager Zhang felt that today's surprises were coming one after another. Could the debut that the little master was talking about be the debut that he was thinking of? Bailey Shangxia nodded casually. From today onwards, I will officially enter the entertainment industry. In the future I will appear in front of you from time to time. Also, other than a manager you better find me an assistant who can save money. Otherwise Manager Zhang, I will fire you. Manager Zhang. Damn it. He was in charge of publicity, not human resources. Why couldn't the devil little master find a suitable assistant? He was the one who was fired. I'll try my best. Manager Zhang felt very helpless. For the 134th time in his life he had the urge to resign and leave. However, when he thought about it carefully, other than the big and small bosses who were harder to please, everything else in the Juwei group was very smooth, especially when it came to money. Well, there's no hurry to find an assistant. You can call the best manager first and ask him to come over. When the little one said this, his tone was very cool. However, when a child said this while leaning against the corner of the wall with his hands slightly raised, it really made people want to laugh. Manager Zhang resisted the urge to laugh until one of the best managers in the entertainment industry walked in with a confused look on his face. Only then did he feel relieved. Pioju, are you looking for me? As expected of a top manager, he was very good at observing the atmosphere. When he walked into the office and raised the corner of his eyes, he more or less understood that the person who was looking for him was definitely not Manager Zhang. However, what was the devil little boss doing? If he was not wrong, was he being punished to stand? The top manager only glanced at Bailey Shangxia once and did not dare to take a second look. After all, everyone knew that the devil little boss was not to be trifled with. Although his current posture was extremely cute, it was still the same. Baligaju's voice was still graceful and noble. Even if he did not look up, it still gave off a strong sense of oppression. The person who is looking for you is not me. Then, the top manager was a little confused. After all, Manager Zhang only told him to come up as soon as possible over the phone and did not tell him what was going on. Even the secretary outside the office did not know anything. According to usual practice, he would not be called to the top floor. After all, the entertainment industry was only a small part of the Juwei group. No matter how good he was still just a manager. Why would he be summoned? I asked Manager Zhang to introduce you to me. The little one pressed his back against the wall and pursed his lips. It's not convenient for me to take the documents in this position. There's a contract on the office table. Help me take a look. If there's no problem, sign the contract with the other party. I want to debut immediately. Debut. Introduce. His reaction was the same as Manager Zhang's. The top manager trembled and immediately glanced at Manager Zhang. We've been classmates for so many years. How could you frame me like this? Chapter 980. Manager Zhang started to look at the ceiling guiltily. He had no other choice, because if there was no one to distract the devilish young master, he would be the one to suffer. He could only drag his good friend down with him. As the saying goes, good friends are meant to be tricked. The golden manager stabilized his emotions and began to convince himself that at the very least, there was no other child in the world who had a better temperament than the demonic young master. Although people who spent too much time with the young master would go crazy, that unique demonic little face of his would definitely be popular the moment he debuted. Moreover, all the resources of the Juwei group would be used on him. If he counted carefully, would this be considered a promotion? After some mental preparation, the manager looked through the information. This commercial is not bad. It's a big name in the country, suitable for the young master's identity. If you debut with this commercial, it should be easy for people to remember you. It's okay if they don't remember. The point is, how much did they pay? Bailey Shangxia raised his little eyebrow. The manager glanced at the price and said, although it's not as good as movie stars, the young master's identity is still there. They also gave a fair price. Bailey Shangxia heard this and raised his little chin. I can appear on screen half naked. So, the manager's eyes were filled with confusion. He really didn't understand why the devilish young master would change the topic to this. Shouldn't it be more expensive to appear on screen half naked? Bailey Shangxia pointed at him with his little finger and said in a very imposing manner, so you should tell them to be responsible for giving me more money. The manager. That's right. Indeed, some movie stars would be more expensive if they appeared on screen half naked, but what's the use of being naked for a 3-year-old brat? Tell me. Who will look at you? Who will look at you? Manager Zhang was also listening at the side and he almost couldn't help but laugh out loud. Especially when he saw his good friend's entire body petrified on the spot, he covered his mouth and coughed twice before saying, "Young master, when you first start out, money isn't the main point. The key is to gain popularity. To me, more money is the most important." Bailey Shangxie said very firmly. The gold medal manager frowned. "Young master, why do you need so much money?" The shares of Ju Wei Group were rising every day. What was wrong with the young master? Bailey Shangxie furrowed his brows and said, "You should know how difficult it is to support a family now." He had always known that it was not easy to support a family, but why would a 3-year-old child say such words? The golden agent, who had always been calm in front of the media, grabbed her hair and asked, "So? That's why I asked them to give me more advertising fees. I don't know if this amount of money is enough to pay for my younger brother's teaching fees." Bailey Shangxie put on a cool expression and sighed seriously. Life is really not easy. The gold medal manager was speechless. "What are you, a 3-year-old, acting like an old man for?" Manager Zhang looked at his old classmate who was about to go crazy and pulled him over. He lowered his voice and whispered, "Did you hear what the young master said just now?" "Of course I heard it. He said that he wants to support a family." "A 3-year-old child wants to support a family?" The gold medal manager did not know whether to laugh or cry. "He even said that he wants to teach his younger brother." "Wait a minute. Younger brother?" The gold medal manager and Manager Zhang looked at each other at lightning speed. Bam. Baligaju reached out and closed the Apple laptop on his desk. He raised his eyes and looked in their direction. The gold medal manager and Manager Zhang swallowed their saliva. They did not expect that the CEO, who had always been known as a devil, was in a good mood. He did not even mention their conversation just now. Instead, he looked at his 2 subordinates with a faint smile and said, "From the car dealership to here. It should be about time. Go and prepare. Arrange for the media interview to be held in the lobby on the 1st floor. I will go down with Shangxie." Yes. Even though Manager Zhang had a lot of questions, he did not dare to ask. He walked out of the office first. The media was very enthusiastic. All kinds of cameras were crowded in the reception hall on the 1st floor. Every reporter was waiting for Baligaju to appear. However, at this moment Hellion Vivian saw a person who was not supposed to be here. "Woman, I have been looking for you for a long time before I finally found your location." In the darkness, a small figure was sitting cross-legged in a car. His eyes were bright ruby red and there was a smile on his face. He looked extremely bloodthirsty and evil. The black scythe on his shoulder was 5 times taller than him. Due to the appearance of the small figure, the entire parking lot seemed to have sunk into an unprecedented chill. The other people who came to park their cars did not understand what was going on. They only felt that the weather was about 30 degrees Celsius. Why did it suddenly become so cold? Could it be because they were in the parking lot? A few people could not help but look behind them. However, they could not see what was going on. Only Hellion Vivian and Qingchen, who came with Hellion Vivian, could see the small figure with the aura of Hades. Behind him was a trembling judge. "Little King of Hell?" When Hellion Vivian spat out these 3 words, her willowy eyebrows furrowed. "Why are you here?" Little King of Hell said in a deep voice, "It only shows that the power of love is great. For Little Hook, I don't care about anything else." Hellion Vivian, "However, there is something you must know." Little King of Hell lowered his voice. "I believe you have also felt it. Ever since your man came to the modern world, the evil aura around him has become more and more intense. Even his murderous aura can be easily revealed. Moreover, he is not aware of it." Hellion Vivian slowly raised her eyes. Her voice was very calm. "What are you trying to say? This isn't a good sign." The son of the King of Hell rubbed his nose and said, "Let me make this clear. I'm risking my life to deliver the news to you because I know that you're Uncle Tang's friend and we've been through thick and thin together since ancient times. That's why I'm here to inform you. Since tearing apart time and space is an act that defies the natural order, both humans and deities would exhaust a huge amount of energy to do so. Only a handful of people can do it. Perhaps Bailey Jiaju is the only one in this world who can do this and chase after you all the way to the modern era. However, the cost of doing so is equally huge. The price he paid to find you is his divinity. You should know that His Highness has fallen from heaven. If he doesn't have his divinity, it means that he will become a complete demon. Chapter 981. Hellion Vivian tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She looked at the little king of hell who was sitting in front of her. After losing her warmth, her beautiful eyes became especially sharp. It was easy to imagine the scene of her fighting a group of demons by herself. The little king of hell had never forgotten that she was Phoenix, the Phoenix who could kill blood see once she picked up the Phoenix bone knife. However, Hellion Vivian did not lose her temper. Instead, she smiled and turned around to pinch Chinchin's face. Son, you get out of the car first. I have something to talk to your little brother about. Chinchin had always been smart. He also understood Hellion Vivian. He knew that once she had decided on something, she would not let anyone interfere. He pushed open the car door and jumped down shakily. He was holding a devil doll in his hand. He did not understand what a godhead was. No one had ever told him about it. However, little Chinchin was very clear about one thing. This person did not bring good news. Perhaps he could think of a solution with his brother when he saw him. After all, it was related to his father. However, he did not know that Hellion Vivian did not want him to listen to what he was going to say next. It was because Beligaju's change was very likely to hurt Hellion Vivian. It was because of this that the little king of hell chose to tell her the news. Tiandao Buddhism and even the group of death gods in the Hades have started to prepare. You should know that when the emperor fell from heaven and became a demon, even the upper three Daos were afraid of him. After so many years, they would not want to see the emperor become a complete demon. If that happened, all living things in the world would be threatened. Without the suppression of the godhead, the evil aura would dominate. When that time comes, he would kill everyone. He won't become like that. Hellion Vivian interrupted the little king of hell. Her side profile revealed a never-before-seen indifference. The little king of hell narrowed his eyes at her. Woman, you should know what a complete demon means. Even you will only become his food when that time comes. Because you have made a contract. Once he helps you to fulfill your wish, the contract will take effect immediately. He will treat you as the most delicious food and devour you bite by bite. His Highness is different from others. He was born from chaos. Once he becomes a demon, he will lose all his humanity. You should know this. I know it very well. However, I will say it again, he won't become like that. Hellion Vivian retracted her hand from the steering wheel and looked at the little king of hell. I won't let him become like that. The little king of hell paused and shook his head. Woman, we all know that no one can stop this change. His godhead is gone. This time his godhead is really gone. Tearing through time and space is more terrifying than falling from heaven. Do you understand what I mean? He didn't find you before. Now that he has found you, the shackles are gone. He must have shown some signs of demonization, such as hating the sun and starting to thirst for blood. When will the war begin? Hellion Vivian didn't wait for the little king of hell to finish speaking. Her voice was so calm that the king of hell felt that she knew the direction of the situation better than he did. I know very well what the people of Tiandao and Buddhism are thinking. This time they came to the underworld because they know that they are not strong enough. They don't want to lose their godhead, so they formed an alliance. Since you came to me, it means that they are almost done with the matter. Have they started to arrange people around him? This time the underworld is on whose side, right? The little king of hell's expression became serious. That's right, Vivian. You have to understand that no one will tolerate an existence of the 6 paths of destruction. He turned from a god to a demon and was born from chaos. He will become a killing machine and you will be the first soul he will claim. That's why I came to tell you that this time, I'm afraid we will become enemies. To be honest, I don't want to be your enemy, but Vivian, you have to admit that when that time comes, he will no longer be the Beligaju you know. He is. Hellion Vivian's starry eyes that had been silent all this time seemed to have a glimmer of light. With a piercing determination she said, no matter what he becomes, he will always be him. Like you said, I don't want to be your enemy, but there is one thing that no one can hurt him in front of me. If the people of the underworld want to make a move, there is no need for him to use his demonic aura. The Phoenix bone knife will make the first move. The little king of hell did not say anything. At that moment the parking lot was very quiet. After an unknown amount of time, the little king of hell let out a long sigh. Even if the people of the underworld don't make a move, you won't be able to protect him. He will hurt you first, won't he? You are now resisting the heavenly Tao and the Buddhist Tao, but in the end the one whose soul will be devoured will be you. You still don't understand what a killing machine means. I understand. Hellion Vivian's voice was somewhat heavy and it carried a strong warning. Even if he becomes a killing machine, even if the entire world wants him to disappear, even if my soul will be devoured, I will protect him when I can. So don't challenge my bottom line. The little king of hell's eyes darkened. I understand. I will control the people of the underworld. But woman, you have to be careful. With that he stood up and smiled. If the entire world wants to be your enemy, then should I stand by your side and sweep the world with my blade? Phoenix is indeed a phoenix. But what the little king of hell was worried about was, after losing his humanity, would Beligaju, who only wanted to kill, still know about these things? What scared him the most was that Beligaju should have already begun to change. How far has he changed? No one knew. Perhaps even he himself was only slightly aware of it. After all, demons represented the darkest of selfishness. He would do everything in his power to fulfill the wish of his exclusive soul. From that moment onwards, he had already begun to demonize. Therefore Vivian was in the most dangerous situation. Even so, do I still have to stay by his side? The little king of hell looked at the axe in his hand and muttered to himself. The judge behind him stuttered, Little Highness, if you tell all these things to Phoenix, Lord will definitely tie you up. Am I afraid of him? The little king of hell blew at his bangs. Go back and tell my father that I will take Little Go's surname in the future. Don't let him come to the human world to look for me. Don't you know that a married son is like spilled water? Chapter 982. Judge, you're clearly the one who's married off, okay? If the adults hear this, they'll definitely beat you to death. Little Highness, this isn't how you chase people, you're completely throwing yourself at them. Little King of Hell didn't care what others thought of him. He carried his giant axe and walked forward, completely ignoring Judge's cries and screams. Qingshan stood there, her little hands playing with the ears of the demon plushie, her eyes looking at the abnormal little brother in front of her, but she didn't say anything. Little King of Hell was more interested in him. After all, he had never met a child younger than him except for Little Hook, that was his future wife. When he saw Qingshan, he began to dig into his pocket. After a long time he took out a piece of chocolate. Do you want to eat? My wife gave it to me. Qingshan thought about it. She was going to see her brother later, and her brother liked to eat chocolate, so she took it and then gave Little King of Hell a pearl, saying in a childish voice, This is for your wife. Judge. Only you would take Little Highness's words seriously. How old is he, and he already has a wife? Little King of Hell was very happy because of Qingshan's words. He immediately decided to bring Little Hook to play with them in the future. He heard that he had an older brother. A pure little demon. He must be very bad. With an even worse creature as a foil, Little Hook realized that there was nothing bad about him, other than the fact that he liked to kill people and drag them to hell. It's decided they'll ask him out to play in the future. Of course, that was on the premise that the Beligaju would really be as Hellion Vivian said, and was still safe. In the car, Hellion Vivian looked at the two children who were talking. She was very clear about Little King of Hell's personality. Since she had just sent Qingshan away, Little King of Hell wouldn't tell Qingshan about this. That was good. Hellion Vivian tilted her head and opened the car door. She smiled and said, Let's go, son. Follow me to pick them up. Qingshan swayed a little as she walked. Her little hand was held by Hellion Vivian as they entered the elevator. She lifted her little face and looked at the numbers on the elevator. Don't worry. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Qingshan's eyes widened as she said, My brother and I are here, so you don't have to worry. Hellion Vivian smiled and pulled her son's little head over. She lowered her head and kissed the hair on the top of his head. I know. What do you want to eat tonight? Remember to choose when you go to the supermarket later. The mother and son often went to the supermarket before, so they were familiar with these things. On the other hand, the father and son pair had always been aloof. Not to mention going to the supermarket, they barely showed their faces in front of others. Therefore, when they walked out, all the cameras and gazes were focused on them. The media rushed to press the shutter button and did not even care about their image. They had never seen such a stylish father and son pair. The older one was so handsome that it made people's legs go weak. Wearing a noble pure black trench coat, he exuded elegance and nobility from his bones. The younger one was like a demon. He had a high nose bridge, light thin lips, and exquisite facial features that made people want to look at him again and again. His eyes also showed that he was not to be trifled with. The two of them standing in front of each other was simply too cute. Today CEO Ju is holding a press conference to announce two things. This was the time to show the strength of a corporate marketing manager. Manager Lee stood up with a faint smile. His voice was not loud, but it was enough for all the reporters present to hear clearly. The first news is that from today onwards, the first successor of Ju Wei Group, young master Bailey Shangxie, will officially enter the entertainment industry. The media did not expect that the young master of Ju Wei Group would actually drop such a bombshell the moment he appeared. Everyone knew that Baligaju had a son, but this son was only seen by the higher-ups of Ju Wei Group. Everyone else had only heard of him. Now not only did they see him, but he would also appear on TV screens from time to time. This was undoubtedly the headline of the headlines. The first successor of Ju Wei Group, entering the entertainment industry with such an identity, did not even need to think about it. He was going to explode in popularity. Plus his face. Oh my God. How could there be such a child? Many female reporters at the scene had already turned from passers-by to fans. Everyone was in the entertainment industry and knew very well what Bailey Shangxie's debut would predict. That face would not only cause a sensation in Asia, but also internationally. Of course, this news is not the main point of CEO Ju's announcement today. Manager Lee continued speaking and looked at Baligaju. The media was all surprised. This is not the main point? Then what is the main point? Manager Lee smiled and gestured for them to be quiet. Just as he was about to speak on his behalf like before, he heard his CEO's voice slowly ring out. His voice was slightly deep and magnetic. The main point is that I want to change the way you have introduced me in the past. I have read many magazines. When they mention me, they always say that I am single. In fact, this is wrong. I am already married. Furthermore, my wife loves me very much. After Bailey Jiaju uttered those words, one could imagine what kind of reaction the crowd had. All the media froze in an instant. Even Manager Lee, who was in charge of publicity, did not know that his CEO would hold a press conference to talk about this. Everyone felt like they had been struck dumb. Only Bailey Shangxie snorted coolly. Dad, that last sentence, did you mix up the object and the subject? This is the first time I have heard someone say that my wife loves me very much in an introduction. That's enough. I was just stating the facts. Baligaju glanced at him indifferently. Also, you can shut up and go look for your manager. His manager was still in shock. At this moment, the media finally reacted. The entire venue was in an uproar. Manager Lee's first reaction was to stop them. However, someone pulled him aside. Pyoju is really married? But why does the people in Ju Wei Group never know about your wife? I don't think you have a female companion before, right? Manager Lee thought that it was over. Another media company was going to close down. After all, although the CEO said that they could ask about his personal matters, such a question would definitely be cut off. However, Manager Lee did not expect that the usually cold and noble man would actually answer. And he even answered with a smile. There was a meaningful look at the corner of his mouth. You will see her in a while. Chapter 983. Baligaju's words were undoubtedly explosive news. Whether it was to the media reporters or Manager Lee, it was too shocking. A few of the company's female employees looked at each other. Their first reaction was that their CEO was really married and was not using this as a publicity stunt for the company. However, everyone's inner feelings were different. Some were envious while others were jealous. After all, they were all at the front desk watching everyone entering and leaving the company. The CEO had never had intimate contact with anyone. In their eyes, Baligaju had always been single. As long as he was single, any one of them could become Cinderella. Generally, girls of this age were still inexperienced and were still dreaming. They did not know that Cinderella was as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns in the world. Everyone was wondering what kind of woman could actually capture the heart of a man like Baligaju. The media wanted to ask more questions such as who the other party was, the other party's family background, and how the other party knew Bailey Jiaju. However, after Baligaju announced his sovereignty, he was not in the mood to answer the questions. He glanced indifferently at the reporters who were asking these questions. His gaze was extremely cold. The reporters were about to break out in cold sweat when they saw his stare. They did not dare to ask more questions. They moved their throats with difficulty and swallowed their words. The media immediately understood Baligaju's taboo and did not dare to ask more about Hellion Vivian. Everyone present was smart and Manager Lee was even more so. After a few words he already understood the main purpose of their cold and honorable CEO accepting the media's interview this time. It was obvious that the CEO was waiting for the media to arrive so that he could let the whole world know that he was married and that his wife loved him very much. Manager Lee was speechless. This press conference was completely used by the CEO as a means to announce his sovereignty. Where was the promised publicity for the company? Manager Lee was on the verge of tears. However, while he was being pulled away, he was distracted to look at the announcements released by the media. There were only a few pieces of news, but the headlines of all the major websites had the words, Ju Wei Group, floating above them. As a marketing manager, there was only one word left in his heart. Beautiful. Under normal circumstances, the press conference would have ended at this point. However, since Manager Lee knew what the CEO was thinking, of course he would not relax. He enthusiastically began to answer some unimportant questions. Anyway, as long as the big boss and the little boss were sitting on the stage, these people would not leave. This was the scene that Hellion Vivian saw when she came in. She could see no less than dozens of cameras being carried by people. The huge reception hall on the first floor was packed with people. Baligaju also saw Hellion Vivian. He curled his lips into a smile, and there was a kind of handsomeness that was like the melting of winter snow. He strode toward Hellion Weiwei with his long legs. The media automatically made way for him. When they turned around, they realized that there was a woman standing not far behind them. The woman was holding a little boy's hand. Her lips were half-curled and she didn't show the slightest sign of stage fright in front of so many people. Instead, she looked handsome and free. The media had never seen a woman wearing a racing suit so beautifully. Half of her trousers were rolled up, revealing her slender ankles. The woman looked very fair and there was a kind of beauty in full bloom. She had a head of waist-length chestnut curly hair. Her face was mostly covered by sunglasses, but it still couldn't hide the warmth that radiated from this person. She saw the media pointing their cameras at her, but she didn't panic. Instead, she took off her sunglasses and gave the reporters a faint smile. She was so beautiful. And this woman was very smart. Not only was she smart, but how many women could talk and laugh in front of so many cameras? Other than people in the entertainment industry, there were also those who were born into famous families. They were radiant from the moment they were born. However, it was obvious that this woman in front of them was not familiar to them, and they had never seen her on any occasion. "You're so late." Baligaju reached out and pulled her over. He put his hand on Hellion Vivian's waist as if there was no one else around, causing an uproar. The reporters began to frantically press the shutter button, wanting to capture this scene. Bailey Shangxie, who was originally very cool, was still tormenting his new manager. When he looked up and saw Qingchen, he walked over and took his younger brother from his mother. Then he rolled up Qingchen's drooping sleeves and reached out to hug her. Hellion Vivian didn't forget to look at the two little ones while talking to Baligaju. Seeing that Baligaju insisted on hugging Xiaobao, she smiled at Baligaju and said, "He misses Qingchen." Yes, he even said today that he wants the advertisers to give him a raise so that he can earn tuition fees for Qingchen. As Baligaju spoke, he tilted his head and kissed Hellion Vivian's hair. His voice was very sexy as he said, "Shangxie and I have been waiting for you guys for 2 hours." Knowing His Highness's temper, Hellion Vivian soothed him and said, "I'll compensate you later." Baligaju didn't say anything else, but the surrounding subordinates could see that he was very satisfied with the situation. Manager Lee and the other senior executives of Ju Wei Group couldn't help but look at each other. The surprise in their hearts was written all over their faces. After all, in their hearts, the CEO Ju who killed people without spilling blood in the business field was really cold. They didn't expect that he would actually act coquettishly toward a woman. That's right, he was acting coquettishly. Although the man's tone and expression were particularly cold, that was the truth. Many senior media personnel heard this conversation and couldn't help but look at Hellion Vivian again. At first, they thought that Baligaju's relationship with Baligaju wouldn't be very good even if he announced his marriage. Otherwise, how could Baligaju not have a female companion by his side? Now they had to re-evaluate this relationship. This was because Baligaju's every move was a declaration that the woman in his arms was very important to him and was unique. Someone couldn't help but sigh. Kyoju, we finally believe that you're really married. However, there were still people who were curious about the child Hellion Vivian brought over. The camera immediately turned to Qingchen. Because they were too complacent, they forgot to be careful. Bailey Shangxie stood in front of her younger brother. At such a young age she was very oppressive. Point your cameras at my father. My younger brother doesn't like to be photographed. Also, you can put my father's and my photos in any magazine today. But if anyone dares to publish my mother's and my younger brother's faces, I promise you that you won't be able to bear the consequences. Chapter 984. When Bailey Shangxie said this, the coldness in his eyes made many reporters shudder. They had only treated him as a child just now. Now they realized that the heir of Juwei Group was not an ordinary child. As if he was threatening them, he looked at their work cards and smiled. Xinhua Media, Guangying Media, I'll remember your companies. Hearing this, the two reporters who had just taken a photo turned pale and looked at Manager Li. Manager Li still had a smile on his face, but his aura did not diminish at all. Since young Master Shangxie said so, please abide by the rules of Juwei Group and delete the photos of Madam and young Master. Otherwise we will use commercial means. Hellion Vivian did not think it was a big deal to show her face. However, it was obvious that Baligaju acquiesced to Bailey Shangxie's actions. He even added with a smile, they should know what should be released and what should not. If they don't, there is no need for them to be in this industry. It was very contradictory, wasn't it? Since they did not want the photos to be released, why did they have to hold a press conference? Soon the industry veterans came to a conclusion and asked Baligaju tentatively, Xiao Ju, do you want to release the photos of you and Madam? Madam's face is not in the photos, only her back. Hearing this, Baligaju smiled. Which company are you from? Tang Enterprise Media. The media man adjusted his glasses. He was an elite, handsome and very smart man. Baligaju's thin lips were still curled. He looked at the media man and instructed Manager Li, give him all the exclusive photos of Juwei Group in the future. Yes. Manager Li was stunned. The other reporters were even more surprised. They wondered what the other party had done to get all the exclusive photos of Juwei Group. Of course, there were also those who hated themselves for not making a move earlier. When those who were often in the industry heard the result, they completely understood what Bailey Jiaju wanted. He wanted to announce to the whole world that this woman was his, but he did not want others to see the treasure in his arms. They did not expect it to be like this. It had been a long time since such a man had appeared in the business circle. Any successful man would more or less be a womanizer. This was because they would always prefer those who were younger than them. The more money and power they had, the more they would do so. It was too easy to obtain them. No one could guarantee that they would be loyal for a lifetime. In this land there were too many men who didn't really take true love seriously. He loved you this year, but he would fall in love with someone else next year. For someone like Bailey Jiaju, who was rich and powerful, and whose handsome side profile alone could make countless women submit to him, it was really rare to see a business emperor who cherished a person to such an extent. There was also another group of female reporters who focused their attention on Bailey Shangxie. If it was said that they had taken a liking to young Master's face in the beginning, they were now extremely attracted to young Master's brother complex. Especially when he heard Qingchen say from behind Bailey Shangxie, "Brother, I brought you chocolate." Bailey Shangxie lowered his head and took it to eat. He did not forget to feed his brother a mouthful. When he wiped his brother's mouth, it made people want to open their WeChat moments and start scrolling. Unexpectedly, Bailey Shangxie won a group of anti-fans. In addition, these anti-fans were all in the media industry. It was destined that Bailey Shangxie would be very popular in this circle in the future. Hence, on the day the press conference ended, someone set up a brother complex team on Weibo. They wrote all the words that the demonic young master said to his brother into a short story. Coupled with Bailey Shangxie's extremely cool little face, it was simply piercing through people's hearts. No one posted a picture of Qingchen's face online. In fact, there was only one picture of her back. It was just that she was being carried by Bailey Shangxie, who was a head taller than her, and she was staggering forward. The focus was still on Bailey Shangxie. That little face of hers was extremely serious. Seeing such a picture, the netizens exclaimed, "How can there be such a sensible brother? A brother complex for 100 years." It's said that young master entered this circle to earn money for his brother's school fees. So cute. No, I want to take her home and raise her. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's wait for young master's debut. For the entire day, the popularity of the words Ju Wei group did not decrease from the internet. Baligaju was very satisfied with the commotion this time. In this way, some people should know who Wei Wei belonged to. Hellion Vivian turned the steering wheel in her hand. After parking the car, she smiled and poked a certain highness's side face. "You seem very happy." Baligaju did not deny it. He opened the door and got out of the car. Hellion Vivian liked a certain highness like this. When he was happy, he was really very handsome. Hence, she would not let him become a killing machine. Even if such a day really came, she would protect him. This man fell from heaven and became a demon for her. He tore apart time and space and lost his divinity. What reason did she have not to protect him? Even if she had to betray the whole world, she would stand by his side. Moreover, the worst-case scenario was that he would help her fulfill her wish and then devour her. As a person of Buddhism, Hellion Vivian could clearly see the demons behind him that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They were beginning to move. She sensed the subtlety of this because this time, a certain highness did not hold her hand. Instead, he stood there and looked at her with a faint smile. Hellion Vivian knew very well that that was the smile of a demon. But so what? Hellion Vivian tilted her head and took a step forward. Then she held Baligaju's hand and said, "We bought a lot of groceries this time. Let's push the cart in." To be honest, Baligaju and Bailey Shangxie had never shopped in a supermarket. Therefore, when they walked in, the father and son frowned at the same time. It was rare that they did not dislike each other. Little Qingshan was already sitting in the trolley consciously. Usually, when he walked, he would sit in the trolley when he went to the supermarket so that it would be more convenient for Hellion Wei Wei to buy things. Bailey Shangxie saw his younger brother sitting in the cart. Without waiting for Hellion Vivian to say anything, he automatically took the cart. Bailey Shangxie's way of treating his younger brother was to throw whatever Qingshan wanted to eat into the cart in a row. Hellion Vivian held her forehead and said helplessly, "You bought too much." "It's okay." Baligaju was very calm. "We'll pay our own way. It's time for him to take some practical actions to support the family. How can he just talk about it?" Hellion Vivian. Chapter 985. Bailey Shangxie wasn't afraid that his sinister father would make him pay the bill himself. After all, he had just signed the contract and received a gold card from his manager. He could do whatever he wanted in the future. Hellion Vivian also pushed a cart. The two of them only liked to shop in the snack section. She brought His Highness to the place where she usually bought vegetables and meat. "What do you want to eat tonight?" Hellion Vivian asked the man beside her with a chuckle. Baligaju obviously had no experience in this place. He didn't understand why he had to do such an inefficient thing himself. However, when Hellion Vivian turned to ask him, it seemed that all his impatience had turned into something else. He looked at her hand and pursed his thin lips. "Whatever." Hellion Vivian smiled. "How about steak? You've always liked to eat beef. Shall I make it rare for you? Medium rare?" Baligaju nodded. There was a gentleness in his eyes that even he didn't know. He reached out and separated Hellion Vivian from the others who were shopping in the supermarket. At this time of the day, the people who came to the supermarket to buy groceries were basically aunties. Baligaju attracted a lot of attention the moment he appeared. After all, it wasn't suitable for him to appear here. Even though he was standing there to protect Hellion Vivian, he was still a shining figure that was difficult to ignore. "Did you see that? The person picking the steak in front is dressed in Armani. Aren't his legs too long? What a good figure. Do you want to hit on him?" "Hit on him? Don't you see that he already has a girlfriend? What a pity. But handsome men and beautiful women are so pleasing to the eye." Hellion Wei Wei listened to the discussion of the girls beside her, tilted her head and smiled at them. The girl's heart softened. So beautiful and has a good personality. No wonder her man is so handsome." He was indeed handsome. Moreover, he was excessively young. He looked a little like a vampire aristocrat in the movies. There was a cold look in the corner of his eyes. Just looking at him made one's heart beat faster. Hellion Vivian knew how influential His Highness's face was, so she didn't let him stay here for long. After picking the steak, she took him to another place. After making the steak, I'll make you a chocolate cake. You and your son love it. Just one piece is enough. Beligage's voice was very indifferent. Let them do the rest. Hellion Vivian, Beauty Wei Wei, Big Brother bought me yogurt, do you want to drink it? Hellion Vivian didn't look at the two little ones for a while and found that the cart was already full. Qingchen sat on the pile of snacks, her eyes very beautiful. Bailey Shangxie said seriously to his younger brother, the car is too small, it can't hold much. I'll buy it for you next time. Little Qingchen nodded as he struggled to stretch out his short legs. Hellion Vivian facepalmed. A cart full of snacks. Wasn't that too much of a wastrel? Thinking of this, Hellion Vivian glanced at Beligaju, indicating for him to do something about it. After receiving Hellion Vivian's gaze, Beligaju lowered his eyes and started to educate his son. His voice was very low and had his usual indifference. Don't buy so many things in the future. Hellion Vivian was touched. After all, from the moment they entered the supermarket until now, His Highness had finally used the right way to educate his son. But it turned out that Hellion Vivian was moved too early. Because His Highness' next sentence was his true purpose. It's troublesome to buy so many things. If you really like them, buy this supermarket and take your time to choose. Bailey Shangxie's little face was very cool. Obviously, he didn't think that there was such a way. Now that he was reminded by his father, he immediately took out his small phone and called his agent. Help me buy a supermarket. The agent glared at him. What do you want me to buy? A supermarket. Bailey Shangxie's voice was indifferent. The bigger the better. The agent gasped. Just as he was about to shout out a stomach full of words, the other party had already hung up. The agent was unwilling to give up. He called back, but the other party didn't pick up. Instead, he received a short message. I'm with my younger brother, don't be noisy. The agent. Who's the one being noisy? Also, don't make buying a supermarket sound like it's as easy as buying ice cream, okay? Also, why did he have to look for him to buy things? Hellion Weiwei could imagine how pitiful her son's manager must be. But Beligaju gave Dabao a look that said, you finally have the ability to analyze things on your own. Hellion Vivian massaged her temples. She still had to educate her son. She pulled Bailey Shangxie over. It's too wasteful to buy a supermarket. Qingchen only likes a few things. He doesn't like most of the things here. Bailey Shangxie thought about it and felt that his mother made sense. Then I won't buy it. Hellion Vivian was finally relieved. My younger brother likes to eat chocolate and potato chips. I'll ask the two manufacturers to buy it. Bailey Shangxie held his small phone coolly and was about to make a call. Hellion Vivian. You'd better buy a supermarket. Beligaju seemed to like seeing Hellion Vivian's helpless look. He pulled her over and laughed softly. The vibration from his chest made her feel close and safe. Hellion Vivian laughed as well. She helped the man tidy up his hair. Her thin lips curved as she walked forward and picked some fruits for the cake. Bailey Shangxie pushed Qingchen behind Hellion Vivian and Beligaju. His small figure was very tall and straight and the scene was very cute. It was almost 5 o'clock when the family of 4 finished shopping in the supermarket. There were indeed too many things. Fortunately, Hellion Vivian drove a Wrangler, which was very spacious. Because she had to bring the 2 little ones, Hellion Vivian gave His Highness the car keys and asked him to drive the car directly to the entrance of the large shopping mall. This way they could directly get in the car and didn't need to carry things for a long time. Because the underground parking lot didn't allow the supermarket's trolley, there was an elevator at the entrance of the shopping mall, which could be directly pushed up. His Highness had always been patient with Hellion Vivian. He took the car keys and walked to the underground parking lot with one hand in the pocket of his suit pants. His deep facial features looked even more handsome in the dark. There were 2 girls in the elevator with him and they were dressed very fashionably. When one of the girls saw him, her eyes lit up. After getting off the elevator, she saw Beligaju walking towards the Wrangler. She thought of a plan and turned to the side to block in front of Beligaju's car. Sir, our car has been driven away. Can you send us to the exit? Can we take a taxi? Chapter 986. Choo-choo, what are you doing? The other girl pulled her arm, but she also agreed with her approach. After all, it would save a lot of effort to get someone to carry them up. Of course, the premise was that this gentleman was willing. The girl called Choo Choo was obviously not as simple as the other girl thought. She was pretty with big eyes and good skin. She was a young girl. She saw this man when she was shopping in the supermarket. At first she felt that it was a pity, but now that they met, it was fate. As for whether he had a girlfriend, she didn't care at all. What's more, such a handsome and rich man, anyone had the right to pursue him. He would only be hers if she really got him. Thinking of this, Choo Choo bit her lower lip and said to Baligaju, "Sir, we don't want to trouble you. It's just that we bought too many things this time. It's very inconvenient for two girls to carry them out." Baligaju didn't say anything. He just sat in the car and looked at her. Choo Choo felt that such a man had to rely on himself to take the initiative. She opened the back door and put her hands together. He was very cute. "Please, please. Sir, you just need to send us to the door." After saying that, she put the snacks in her hand on the back seat, looking delicate and pitiful. She thought that no man would refuse her in this way. Baligaju played with the car keys in his hand. His eyes were very light. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "You'd better take your things out of the car." Choo Choo raised her eyebrows. It didn't matter that he was so cold. She still had a backup plan. "Sir, I know you are afraid that your girlfriend will misunderstand. We will explain to her later. We won't cause you trouble." Girls like Choo Choo always felt that when dealing with men, as long as you were pure enough, good-looking, and knew how to act coquettishly, no one could bear to. This was the easiest first step to get close to a man. But obviously she didn't understand what kind of person Baligaju was. Just when she thought that she had successfully hooked up with Shun Feng Cheng, Baligaju turned off the engine and said coldly, "Get lost." Choo Choo was at a loss of what to do. Her entire body stiffened. She never thought that this would be the result. She stretched out her hand, wanting to tug on Baligaju's sleeve and act coquettishly. However, in the next second, Baligaju used an unknown object to cut open her neck. The thick smell of blood caused the originally thick hostility to spread to Baligaju's eyes. He looked at the girl in front of him and curled his thin lips into a faint smile. He was a demon through and through, always enjoying the taste of blood. He opened his mouth and gently licked the corner of his lips. Then he slowly lowered his head towards Choo Choo. In that instant, Choo Choo was completely dumbfounded. A huge sense of fear was like an invisible hand, tightly squeezing her heart. She wanted to shout, but she found that it was difficult for her to even make a sound. When the girls saw this scene, she trembled and was about to take out her phone to call the police. Monster. That was a monster. Who would have thought that such a man would suddenly make a move on a girl? Although that face was still impeccably handsome, especially when the hostility was pervading, Baligaju looked more like a handsome vampire who had walked out of a movie. However, the fear was real. Choo Choo trembled as she listened to the man approach her and whisper, "Such a young body, the taste will definitely be very good." At that time, Choo Choo really thought that she would be killed by the man. However, in the next second, the man stopped and looked at her with a picky gaze. "Oh, it's not that smell. As expected, I still can't tolerate the stench of a soul." With that said, the man swung his hand and threw her out. It was as if he was looking at a pile of trash, as if he disliked eating. The two girls hugged each other and looked at the scattered snacks on the ground. They began to regret provoking such a man. They didn't know what had happened. However, demons were the most susceptible to the mental state of humans. The more they challenged the three views, the more shameless they were, and the more selfish they were, the more they could arouse the demon's nature. The darkness brought out by the girl's thoughts was like a nourishment for the demon. In addition, Baligaju was stained with blood, which meant that he was really starting to want to devour souls. Almost before they got into the car, Hellion Vivian could feel the hostility coming from the Wrangler. How could this be? Why was it so heavy? Hellion Wei Wei furrowed her brows. Bailey Shangxie, who was taking care of his younger brother, also raised his head at this moment. A blood-red light flashed across his eyes. That was the effect between demons. She couldn't let Baligaju's demonic nature affect Shangxie. Little demons were immature and were the easiest to kill. This was Hellion Vivian's first reaction. Therefore, she gathered the spiritual aura in her body and turned to Bailey Shangxie. "Shangxie, take your younger brother back to the car. Don't go to the villa for the next few days, understand?" Bailey Shangxie realized that something was wrong, and so did Qingchen. However, the two of them knew that they couldn't help at this time, so they simply nodded obediently. Hellion Vivian looked at the wrangler that stopped in front of her. The man inside was smiling. It was still him, but his eyes were dyed red. Get in. He thought that Hellion Vivian would avoid him. He also hoped that Hellion Vivian would avoid him. But when his thoroughly cold fingers were grasped in someone else's hand, Bailey Jiaju somewhat stiffened. Not only was his thirsty appetite not suppressed, on the contrary, it made him very much want to eat this soul that belonged to him alive. There's blood on it. Hellion Vivian acted as if she didn't see the change in him. She wiped his fingers clean and then said, "Our son will go to the car shop later. The two of us will go back to the villa. What do you think?" Baligaju smiled. Very good. He didn't like anyone to disturb him. Hellion Vivian took back her hand. Then let's drive. Takes a long time to make steak. They didn't waste any more time. The wrangler's performance was very good. When the car drove out, the lines were unusually smooth. Qinshan stood in the same place and looked at the wrangler that disappeared into the traffic. His eyes dimmed. Bailey Shangxia reached out and held his hand. His thoughts were very clear. It was because of this that he knew why his mother wanted to send him and his younger brother away. His father was demonizing, a very serious demonization. It should be the side effect of tearing time and space. His father would devour souls like him. Or even more so than him. Because once his father's demonic nature was released, nothing could suppress it. Bailey Shangxia also knew that his mother was afraid that his father's demonic nature would affect him. The enchantment just now was the evidence. The only thing he could do now was to take care of his younger brother and stabilize the demon world. He didn't want them to be affected by his father and run around killing people. Bailey Shangxia held Qinshan's hand. The expression on his face was more serious than ever. Chapter 987. There was no sunlight in the villa all year round. Everywhere was filled with the faint fragrance of roses. The burgundy carpet was laid on the wooden floor, which made Bailey Jiaju's skin look even whiter. That kind of whiteness was sickly, but for a demon it was a normal thing. Hellion Vivian was frying the steak in her hand, looking at the figures outside the window. She narrowed her eyes, and when she turned her head again, there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. It's better to add some mint to the wine. I'll go out and get some. Baligaju smiled as well. His fingers brushed his thin lips, and the evil aura in his eyes began to churn with black fog. The effect of the demonization was bound to attract the people from the three upper realms. At this time, the figure standing outside wanted to kill Baligaju before he was completely demonized. Although more than a dozen people from Tiandao were no match for Baligaju, there was still a loophole in Baligaju's body, and they had a chance to make a move. During the demonization, there would be an hour when Baligaju would lose his ability to fight, and that would be the best time for them. The alliance between Tiandao and Buddhism was not something that anyone could resist. However, when they saw the phoenix bone knife in front of them, everyone's expression changed. Hellion Weiwei was still wearing modern clothes, but as she slowly walked forward, illusory lotuses bloomed under her feet one after another. Amidst the gusts of wind from her blade, the crowd seemed to have seen the great Phoenix King who cleared the sea of blood. At this time she still had the possibility of becoming a Buddha. Soon the people from the three upper realms realized that this was going to be a tough battle. The man in the Kasaya looked up at Hellion Vivian. "Phoenix, you shouldn't have stopped us. This time we came for the righteous path of the three realms. The Emperor has begun to demonize. Do you want to see him become a murderous demon and destroy the three realms? It's better for everyone if you step aside now. It's better for everyone if you leave now." Hellion Vivian's voice was very cold, and the scimitar was surrounded by a fiery aura. The Void Walkers immediately took a step back and looked at the woman in front of them. Only then did they realize that the phoenix standing in front of them didn't weaken after coming to the mortal realm. Instead, there was an unknown force supporting her, allowing her to not lose out to the wisdom king of the Buddhist realm who used to wield the scimitar. "Are we leaving or fighting?" The 5 simple words were filled with an irresistible aura. No one dared to approach within 500 meters of the saber. The Void Walkers looked at Hellion Vivian and said in a deep voice, "You will regret this, Phoenix. What you have done is not only a betrayal of Buddhism, but also a betrayal of the three realms of human, God and Buddhism. None of them will tolerate you. You have protected one person, but you have pushed everyone in the world into the abyss of hell. Is this how you repay the true Buddha when he brought you from Mount Buzhou to the world of Buddhism? Where do you think the people of the world are? Everyone who loves you will lose their lives because of your decision now. Do you really want to do this, Phoenix? The Void Walkers roared the last two words. Hellion Wei Wei listened to the other party's words and her fingers tightened. Her voice was cold as she said, "If that day comes, I will leave this world with him. But before that, I will kill whoever comes." The Void Walkers knew that they couldn't persuade Phoenix. It should be said that from the beginning, even the true Buddha couldn't persuade Phoenix. Phoenix's debt to the true Buddha had been repaid thousands of years ago. Now it seemed that she was only protecting this one person. They had only seen such a phoenix when she cleared the sea of blood back then. At that time she was covered in blood from head to toe with her saber on Mount Buzhou. No one could stop such a reckless phoenix. In order to repay Sakya's kindness, she became the Buddhist saber for thousands of years. She cleared the sins of the world and protected the righteous in the world. Now, in order to protect Baligaju, she was going to overturn everything. The Void Walkers said, "You will regret it." But they never understood that this time Hellion Vivian was willing to do it. Similarly, she was not lying. Such a day really came, it would be impossible. She would leave this world with Baligaju. But she would never tolerate anyone hurting him. The people of Tiandao knew that if this stalemate continued, there would be no consequences. The wind created by the rotation of Phoenix's bone saber was like a knife on their faces. They looked at each other and made a plan in their hearts. They had to retreat first. It was too difficult to deal with Phoenix by relying on Buddhism alone. They had to join forces with the people of Hades to attack together. Amit Ba. The Void Walkers shook their heads and disappeared with the people of Tiandao. But it turned into a sigh. "Phoenix, why are you doing this? In the end, the only one who will be hurt is yourself." Hellion Vivian's back paused for a moment. She did not look back. Instead, she walked into the villa. As she closed the door, an invisible barrier rose behind her. The pure spiritual energy had the effect of purification. Although Hellion Vivian knew that purification was useless at this point, at least it could delay the time of Baligaju's demonization. "You're back." Bailey Jiaju leaned against the wall and looked at her lazily. He was swirling a glass of red liquid in his hand. His deep eyes were dyed red with blood. "Why didn't you let them take me away? Oh, what a stupid decision." It was obvious that he was going to demonize. At this time no one would go near him. Baligaju laughed in his heart. His evil aura slowly surged out, echoing with the group of demons behind him. That kind of scene was like the blade of the greatest villain before he killed someone. It was terrifying and dazzling. Hellion Vivian looked at him and took a step forward. Suddenly she hugged his waist and said in a low voice, "You're not stupid. Let's continue eating." Baligaju's body shook. The person in his arms was so warm. Compared to his cold body when that person kissed him, it was so gentle. Hellion Vivian kissed him on the corner of his mouth. "At least finish the steak." Baligaju did not speak. The empty part of his chest was a little warm. His red eyes gradually faded as deep as the sea. He seemed to have thought of something, but he couldn't remember anything. In his memory, there was a small figure standing on the snow-covered mountain Tenya. She was wearing a blood-red kasaya. She handed him a steamed bun with a cold face. At that time he thought that it would be good if this small figure belonged to him. So, even after they grew up, he would always call her Little Phoenix in his heart. It was just strange that he couldn't remember what she really looked like. Chapter 988. The only thing that filled his mind was the thought of obtaining it. However, demons didn't have hearts. The only thing that could make Baligaju chase after her was her scent. Presumably her blood must be very sweet. Also, her soul seemed to be very delicious and smelled very sweet. Smelling the faint fragrance at the tip of his nose, Baligaju closed his eyes as if he was intoxicated. He stretched out his arm to hold her waist and the tip of his tongue seductively licked his thin lips. His fangs seemed to be gently rubbing against Hellion Vivian's neck as if he was teasing her. He had to admit that he liked this smell. He liked it very much. He almost couldn't wait to tear her apart. However, just as he was about to bite her neck, she hugged him tightly. That person hugged him tighter and buried her face in his neck. Her voice was a little hoarse. "Don't stand here. The sun is strong here. It's not good for you. Even if you want to eat me, this is not a good choice. Beligaju paused. She knew that he wanted to devour her. Usually, the souls that he devoured would either scream in fear or be confused by him and wrap around him like they were begging for sex. But obviously she was different. She was protecting him. And very soberly, she used the tip of the knife to cut her wrist and then pulled him into the darkness. She touched his hair with one hand and put her wrist in front of him. That pair of clear eyes were like the stars in the night. Drink. Beligaju didn't immediately act because he felt very comfortable. Her hand gently played with his hair like she had never been in contact with anyone before. Her hands were very soft and tender and successfully blocked the thirst that surged out of his throat. Bang. Bailey Jiaju took a deep breath and pushed her away. He turned on the shower in the bathroom and immersed himself in the scalding hot water. After his silver-gray hair was wet, it hung on the side of his ears, blocking all of his expressions. Hellion Vivian stood outside the door and looked at his blackened nails. Her eyes darkened. Beligaju seemed to be enduring a great pain, but that pain soon disappeared. He grabbed his collar with one hand, and when he looked up, his lips curled into a smile. His dark eyes were like a dream, gradually forming an invisible vortex, as if he wanted to devour everything in the world. The supreme demon king of the demon world. There was no one else who could captivate all living things more than him, free and unrestrained. When he had fallen from the heavens, he had been supported, hunted down, and infatuated by countless people. Now he just wanted to taste what the person standing in front of him tasted like. The problem was that the other party was his exclusive soul. Strangely enough, he was unable to determine what the other party wished for. It was rare for Beligaju to be perplexed, but then he laughed evilly. Hellion Vivian looked at his wet appearance and didn't think too much. She picked up a white towel from the side, tiptoed and covered his head. Beligaju took the opportunity to grab her waist and pressed his other hand on her injured wrist. Just like that, he pressed her against the wall. His breath was constantly changing because the person in front of him was suppressing it, but also because of his thirst he wanted to tear something apart. Demonization was very painful, but resisting it was 10,000 times more painful. Hellion Vivian couldn't bear to see Her Highness suffer, so she moved her wrist and put it on his lips. At that moment, Beligaju's muscles tightened, and he couldn't resist the burning in his throat. He lowered his head and bit the slender white wrist in front of him. The sweet blood melted on the tip of his tongue. It was the most wonderful soul he had ever tasted. This was the taste. This was the taste he really wanted. Demons weren't like vampires, they didn't need a lot of blood, but the blood from the soul could relieve a lot of their pain and let them confirm the taste of the soul. But everything was in chaos. Such a wonderful taste made Beligaju a little unable to control himself. He reached out and tore the cloth on Hellion Vivian's body. He pressed his palm on Hellion Vivian's waist and kept sucking on her wrist. He couldn't help but drink a few more mouthfuls. As a demon, he knew very well that he shouldn't eat souls like this, but the gaze of the person in his arms looking at him made him want to swallow her whole body into his stomach. Beligaju was very dissatisfied that he only tasted this little bit, but he couldn't really suck her dry. What he wanted was her soul. It was a complete soul. When Beligaju thought of this, he stopped and looked at the pale and colorless person under him. He didn't know why, but his originally empty chest seemed to have been filled with the northwest wind. It was wet and cold. Suddenly, his pupils shrank and he quickly picked up Hellion Vivian. For the first time in his life he panicked. His fingers tore the white cloth and wrapped Hellion Vivian's wrist. When the blood couldn't be seen, he reached out and pressed his forehead. He said in a deep voice, "You go to the car dealership, I want to stay alone for a while. Get up tomorrow, no leave today, I'll go pack up now." Hellion Vivian couldn't leave, so she refused directly. "Wherever you go, I'll be there." Heh. Beligaju chuckled, pinched Hellion Vivian's chin and began to talk nonsense. "Hellion Vivian, when did you learn how to pester other women?" "I said I was very annoyed and wanted to be quiet for a while." Hellion Vivian stood up, looked at him and didn't give in at all. She only said 3 words, "I'm not going." Beligaju's fingers tightened and his eyes fell on her wrist wrapped in white cloth, and his voice became colder. "What's the use of you staying here? Do you want to stop me from hunting? As long as it's my blood, you won't be demonized so quickly." Hellion Vivian pressed her furry head against his chest. "And I want to accompany you, it's that simple." Beligaju resisted the urge to hug her and smiled evilly. Phoenix, you haven't changed at all. You're so stupid. Who do you really think will be by your side for a lifetime? Without Buddhism, Phoenix will definitely be vulnerable. It seems that all my inferences are right. If it weren't for you, those useless people from the upper realm would have rushed in, and I wouldn't have evolved to such a perfect state. But if you stop me from going out, it will only make people feel disgusted. To put it bluntly, I want to go out now to hunt and find a fresh girl. I don't want to drink your blood anymore. Phoenix, you're no longer useful to me. Chapter 989. Is that so? Hellion Vivian raised her head and looked at him. With a flick of her wrist, the prayer beads wrapped around her wrist immediately turned into a scimitar and directly slashed at her left hand. Plang. Hellion Vivian's hand was not cut. Instead, Beligage's entire body surged with demonic aura and blocked the phoenix scimitar with one arm. His face was gloomy. What are you doing? Didn't you say that you don't need my blood? I'm just experimenting. Hellion Vivian's voice was very faint. As soon as her voice fell, she pounced on the man and pressed Beligage's entire body under her body. Her small face buried in his chest. Since I'm not important, why are you stopping me? Beligage's blood-red eyes looked at the ceiling. His hands were placed on both sides of him and firmly pressed against the floor. His hands were tightly clenched into fists. Because if he didn't do that, he would definitely not be able to resist hugging her, locking her in his embrace and then continuously hurting her. Why couldn't this person be like others and let him fend for himself? Why did she have to be so good to him, so good that he didn't even want to let go? I just don't want to force myself to drink blood that I don't like. You should also know that I can pounce on anyone I see now. Your experiment has no meaning at all. Even if it was another woman, it would be the same. Beligaju laughed, his gaze cold. Also, I don't like people touching me. You better leave me now. Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes and looked at him. After becoming a demon, will people become stupid? Or do you really think that I'm stupid and can't see anything? Beligaju, are you looking down on me? If you want me to leave you, you can just kill me. There's no need to say so much. Phoenix, when are you going to stop being so self-righteous? Beligaju's voice turned cold. Hellion Vivian's expression was calm. Then just treat me as self-righteous. I'm the most suitable person to stay by your side. Others will only speed up your demonization. It's going to be dark soon. After dark, it's the most difficult. Don't think that you can chase me away and then go hunting by yourself. I want to watch you. Beligaju opened his mouth. Hellion Vivian blocked him with one sentence and was very imposing. Shut up. If you talk nonsense, I'll take off all your clothes. Even if you go out, you'll be naked. Hellion Vivian's words were somewhat unreasonable. Bellion, he reached out and hugged her. He wanted to ask her, what about you? What about you? What? After demonization, no one would want to be near him. This person was still so stupid. Bailey Jiaju bit Hellion Wei's neck ferociously, but he did not break her skin. Instead, he patiently and gently kissed her skin. His voice was deep. Phoenix, you're really stupid. You've been so stupid since you were young. I was born from the chaos, not a god, not a demon, and not even a human. Why did you have to throw me a steamed bun, a vegetarian steamed bun? People from the chaos only eat meat, don't you know that? If I didn't eat, you would visit me every day. You're the stupidest person in the entire Mountain Tenya. Look at that time, no one dared to approach me, but you were so stupid that you left after putting on a steamed bun. When you walked toward me in your kasaya, it was already foreshadowing that you would be this stupid. You're attacking my intelligence again. Hellion Vivian reached out and hugged him tightly. His face was reflected in her eyes. She touched him with her fingers and smiled gently with some pride. I hate it when people reject me. If you don't eat, I will feed you every day. Later you left. When we met again, you were a member of Tian Dao. Very arrogant. I wanted to snatch you from Buddhism a long time ago. Those old bald donkeys in Buddhism were not willing to let you go at all. However, you carried the wooden bucket and watered the Bodhi tree by yourself. If it were me, I would definitely not let you do these things, nor would I lock you in those dirty wooden huts and make you copy those complicated scriptures. You should be locked up with the most beautiful jewel chain. Those people have no taste at all. At this time, Beligaju's voice sounded particularly pleasant. Demons were born with a bewitching sex appeal. As long as he wanted, it seemed that he could capture anyone. His fingers ran down Hellion Vivian's hair and dyed it black bit by bit. His eyes lowered. If I want to eat you next time, take your phoenix knife and stab it directly into my chest. Those people in Tiandao Buddhism always want to destroy me, but they never know that the only one who can really kill me is you. Remember, when I'm eating, I'm the most vulnerable. That's the best time to do it. Now knock me out first because I want to kill too much. You don't want to see me lose my mind. Hellion Vivian did not reject Baligaju's request this time. Now Baligaju's breath was very chaotic and unstable. Hellion Vivian only needed to use a little skill to make him faint. At night, the darkness in the heart of the bustling city would be completely released. This was the demon's favorite energy source. All dirty thoughts originated from the human heart. Everyone who hid behind the internet would find a way to release their stress when they could not find a way to vent during the day. Snatching boyfriends, keeping mistresses back and forth in the workplace, comparing and ostracizing in school, behind all these bustling activities were the nutrition of demons. Hellion Vivian was very clear that Baligaju could not stay in the villa anymore. He wanted to go to a place with fewer people, the fewer the better. Almost without any hesitation, she used Baligaju's phone to call Azure Dragon and asked him to drive the private jet to the villa and not approach. Hellion Vivian put the sleeping Baligaju into the pure black coffin that originally existed in the villa. The coffin was purified with Buddha beads around it. Demons did not need to breathe. The rose petals were scattered around Bailey Jiaju's body. His sleeping appearance was more innocent than any angel. His hands were placed in front of him and his nose was straight. He was quiet and beautiful. Hellion Vivian leaned over and kissed him on the lips. She had never told him. That little phoenix wanted to talk to him, so she threw meat buns to him time and time again. In fact, she had done this many times when she was in Buddhism. But only this one person gave her a response. Compared to those who saw her as a scourge, this young man with a straight back never showed her any malice, although he was very arrogant. But this did not stop Hellion Vivian from throwing meat buns to him for the second time. Chapter 990. When she was the Wisdom King of Phoenix, Hellion Vivian never knew what happiness was. Her hands were stained with blood and she was not tolerated by Buddhism. Every time she returned to the Hall of Great Strength, people would avoid her because of the blood on her. She often did not understand why she was alive. She did not have the heart to save all living beings. Therefore, the older she grew, the more bored she was. She did things she did not like day after day. She had no friends, no one to talk to, and no freedom. She only had the supreme position of Buddha. She did not understand the compassion of all living beings that the Venerable said. Now she looked at the person in the coffin. He finally understood. If there was really something to be touched, it was because of such a person that it became noisy. Therefore, she would never hand him over to anyone. Hellion Vivian reached out and closed the coffin. Then she called young Master Tang and went straight to the point without any preamble. I need a batch of fresh blood. It's best to get it from a regular hospital through blood donation. Did something happen to you? The man on the sofa stood up. He was dressed in a military uniform and looked at the night view outside the window. Is it related to your man? Hellion Vivian did not hide it. She paused for a moment and said, I'll solve it myself. Hearing her words, the man did not ask more. His voice was very calm. What blood type do you want? I'll call and ask them to get a box of blood from the hospital. I don't want blood from the blood bank. I want blood from a donation. That kind of blood will not be too bad. Hellion Vivian paused and said, I'm going to the Tibetan area. I need a local to pick me up. I understand. The man flicked the cigarette in his hand and said in a very pure voice, I'll ask the people over there to prepare the blood bag. But wait, I want to know how long you'll be there so that I can be more prepared. Hellion Vivian knew that she was a little panicked this time. Fortunately, young Master Tang reminded her. She stabilized her breath and began to think carefully. At least 10 days, at most a month. I don't know the details. There will be 2 of us, including me. It's best that we won't be disturbed where we are going. All right, fly directly to the address below. The advantage of having a private jet was that he could avoid a lot of investigations and go directly to where he wanted to go. However, the place that Hellion Vivian went to this time was the largest uninhabited area in China. Qinghai Kiki Shili Level 1 Nature Reserve, snowline 3,000 meters. The terrain was high and the temperature was extremely low. Even Tibetans rarely lived in this area. Hellion Vivian looked back at the coffin on the plane. This time they didn't bring the pilot. Hellion Vivian flew the plane herself. When the plane landed, the Tibetan antelopes drinking water by the lake seemed to be frightened and began to run wildly. However, this did not affect Hellion Vivian at all. She opened the cabin door and a person dressed like a Tibetan immediately ran over. The man was wearing a thick blanket and a hat on his head. He had one hand on the top of his head and his left hand on his chest. When he saw Hellion Weiwei, he smiled and said, "Tashi delay." The Tibetan's voice was very loud and it always made people feel better. Hellion Vivian took off the earphones on her head, looked at him and smiled. "Tashi Deli. To be honest, I really didn't expect to get business in this season." The Tibetan looked at Hellion Vivian's clothes and said in stiff Chinese, "You'd better wear more clothes. It's too cold here. The highest temperature is 5 degrees below zero. You definitely can't stand it. My name is Tashi, you can call me that in the future. At this time no one will go to the mountain. You need a local guide, but the wind is too strong today and it's too late." Hellion Vivian walked to the cabin door and her smile did not change. "Thank you, Tashi, but forget about the guide. Young Master Tang should have told you. I'm going to the coldest side now. I'll drink the milk tea later. I have a luggage that looks a little big. I hope you can calm down when you see it. Don't be surprised and don't scream." Receiving business at this time, Tashi already knew that this would be a strange customer. After all, the people who came to Hozil were not normal. It was easy to lack of oxygen here and there were very few people. It was difficult to know if there was any danger. "Okay." Tashi looked at Hellion Vivian calmly. "But you must bring the tent up the mountain and the sled dogs. They can still play a role." Hellion Vivian nodded. "I'll bring the tent, but I don't need the sled dogs. I have a Tibetan Mastiff. Can help me." "Tibetan Mastiff?" Tashi looked around. Where was the Mastiff? Hellion Vivian moved her fingers and chanted a spell. Her voice was low. "Little Black, come out." Tashi was still looking for the Tibetan Mastiff when he saw a black hound walking out from the depths of the cabin. His body was surprisingly big. Probably because the color of its fur was too pure. When it stood in the dark, it seemed that its body was emitting a thick black fog. Was there a Tibetan Mastiff that big? Tashi was puzzled. He had seen a lot of Tibetan Mastiffs and there were a few at home, but he had never seen such a big one. "I brought it here. Blackie has a good personality. You can put all the food I want on its back," Hellion Weiwei said as she walked closer to it. At this time, Zhashi finally saw clearly what she was pulling behind her. His expression suddenly changed, but he did not say anything. Instead, he took out a rope and handed it to Hellion Weiwei. "Do you want to use this? The iron chain is too cold to hold in your hand." "Oh." Hellion Vivian smiled. "Young Master Tang is right. You are very professional." Tashi looked at the pure black coffin again. "Many people come here for sky burials, but this is the first time I see someone bringing a coffin. To be honest, it's quite scary. But you Han people have always been more meticulous than us. You probably want your friend to leave in a better state." Hellion Vivian stroked the coffin with her fingertips. "He is not gone. He is sleeping. Maybe you can see him in the future." Tashi did not take Hellion Vivian's words seriously. In his opinion, Hellion Vivian just could not accept the death of her friend. After all, even the Tibetans knew that no one could be locked in a coffin and still be alive unless the corpse came back to life. However, pure Tibetans had always been kind. Their true god Allah taught them not to blaspheme any soul, even if it was already dead. Chapter 991. Zhashi carefully prepared everything that needed to be prepared. What this guest wanted the most was meat and wine, and then some harmful fruits and a large barrel of pure water. These things were all placed on a raft, and then a rope was tied around the Tibetan Mastiff's body, so that it could carry these things forward. There was only a box of things, but Zhashi did not know what it was. When he pushed Hellion Vivian away, he said in stiff Chinese, "This was sent by young Master Tang's people. It has just arrived in the tent. Do you want to take it?" "Yes, I need it very much. Thank you, Zhashi." The work of binding was done by Hellion Vivian. After all, no matter how bold Zhashi was, he could not help but feel afraid when he saw the magic dog. After everything was ready, Hellion Vivian's fingers clenched the iron chain and walked into the endless Hozil. The snowline of the plateau was white and misty. Every line on the continent symbolized the unique fierceness and strength of ethnic minorities. But what Joshi did not expect was that Hellion Vivian did not sit on the wooden board like those who came to travel in the past. Instead, she walked in front of the black magic dog and put the hood of her coat on her head, only revealing her beautiful eyes. Such a person stood in the darkness, her dark windbreaker fluttering in the wind. Her steps were steady as she walked on the ice field. Her left hand was wrapped in pure white bandages, and her right hand was pulling on the iron chain. Her entire body seemed to be shrouded in a black fog that could not be dispersed. She was arrogant and omnipotent. Joshi scratched his head. He always felt that such a person was really rare, but the taboo of doing business with customers was curiosity. So Joshi did not say anything more and turned to enter the tent. He had to welcome a small number of plateau explorers tomorrow. Hellion Vivian walked to the edge of the cliff and looked at the towering mountain peak in the distance, which was surrounded by wind and snow all year round. Without wasting any time, she began to bend down and set up the tent. Then she put the coffin into the tent. At that moment, countless red spider lilies bloomed one after another, forming a strange and grand scene. Like a raging fire, every flower was in full bloom, delicate and alluring, carrying the fragility of the early morning, yet enchanting to the extreme, making people feel that they were extremely beautiful. Hellion Vivian's eyes darkened. She knew very well what the blossoming of the bouquet of death meant. However, none of this could stop what she was going to do next. Hellion Vivian opened the wooden box, her eyes still cold. If Joshi knew what was inside, he would definitely be scared to the point where his face would turn white. She reached for 2 bags and placed them in the glacier outside the tent. Then she lit the portable stove and added a piece of wood to it. When it was about time, Hellion Vivian pushed open the black coffin. The man inside was still sleeping peacefully. On his chest, a gorgeous datura flower bloomed. There were so many flowers, but only that one was deep red, as deep as blood. 2 sharp fangs protruded from his thin lips. That was a face that could turn all living things upside down. It was noble, elegant, and a work of God. He just lay there quietly, his slender hands slightly crossed, elegantly folded in front of his chest. His long and thick eyelashes fell down, forming a shadow. He looked like an innocent angel. But Hellion Vivian knew that he was not an angel. The fangs of the devil had been revealed. When this person woke up again, no one could guarantee what would happen. Hellion Vivian leaned against the coffin and slowly closed her eyes. She needed to rest, because only by ensuring that she had enough strength to deal with what was coming next. After a night of flying, Hellion Vivian quickly fell into a light sleep. When she woke up again, it was already 6 o'clock in the morning. There were only sporadic sparks left on the bonfire, and the surroundings were dark and silent. Vaguely, she seemed to be able to smell the scent of blood at the tip of her nose. It was very strong. Hellion Vivian immediately stood up and looked behind her. The black coffin was empty, but there were many empty blood bags in the tent. One by one, they were labeled with the blood type and the person's name. Hellion Vivian frowned and walked out of the tent. The thin fog on the plains had begun to fade, leaving only a vast expanse of white and green. It was a sign that the sun was about to rise. Beligaju sat on the glacier, his sleeves like flowers blooming against his fair wrists. He held a blood bag in his mouth, his eyes slightly narrowed, enjoying the pleasure of drinking. Although the taste of the blood was not the best. But he was unusually hungry and needed to fill something with blood. He saw Hellion Vivian walking over, and his thin lips curved into a devilish smile. His white fangs were slightly exposed, and there was a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Fortunately, there was no one in Hozil, otherwise with Beligage's appearance, anyone who saw it would cause an unexpected panic. He was still so handsome that people couldn't move their eyes away, but that sickly skin and slightly curved lips couldn't hide the evil. Human. Hellion Vivian noticed Beligage's excitement, but the excitement of demons was always different from that of ordinary people. When they first entered the world, they were as pure as an angel with small black wings. In the end, after being muddled, they learned the human's obsession and greed incisively and vividly. So demons had all kinds of forms, but they were as elegant as magicians. They were evil to the bone, and people fell into it without knowing it. It smells so good. Beligaju threw the blood bag in his hand to the side. His voice was slightly low, his eyes looked at Hellion Vivian, and the tip of his tongue licked his lips. Hellion Vivian's heart sank. Had it already begun? She had completely lost her memory. Her Highness had forgotten about her. The weather outside was bitterly cold, and when the wind blew on her face, it was so cold that it hurt. Hellion Vivian's fingers were stiff for a long time before she recovered. She didn't touch the knife but picked up the blanket on the side and walked over. "It's cold here. Next time when you come out, remember to wear something." Beligaju's eyes were deep. He looked at Hellion Vivian, who was approaching him, and reached out to pull her into his arms. His voice was evil. "So it's my master, no wonder it tastes so good. But what do you want to do by bringing me to this place? Stop me from hunting? Hey, you're really naive. In a place where there is no one, my body's aura can delay the spread of the demon in your body." Hellion Vivian looked at him without hiding. "There is no human in a radius of hundreds of miles. No one will affect you, and you don't have to think about hunting everywhere. The blood bags in the tent are enough for you to drink for 7 days. Now come with me first." Chapter 992. Hellion Wei Wei glanced at him and said, "Don't try to lie to me. We can have hostility between us and we can test each other, but don't put on an act in front of me. If you want to make me happier, put on the blanket." With that, Hellion Vivian stood up and hugged him again. This time she wrapped him in the blanket and looked at him calmly. It was the first time that Bailey Jiaju met a woman who could ignore his sexiness. He laughed in a deep voice. Then he bent down and put his thin lips next to her ear. "Your body obviously likes me. I can feel it." Hellion Vivian looked up and said slowly, "Then, do you feel that even my heart likes you?" Bailey Jiaju curled his thin lips and mocked the world. "You want to discuss love with me? That kind of illusory thing, only stupid humans would be deceived by it. My master, as long as you lie down obediently, I can let you enjoy the supreme happiness." As soon as he finished speaking, he kissed her behind her ear. Every inch of his lips carried a unique coldness. Hellion Vivian's body trembled and she wanted to push him away. Unfortunately, the man knew her every sensitive point. And Beligaju enjoyed the current position very much, especially when he kissed her neck with blood on his lips. That feeling was wonderful. Even the best virgin blood didn't give him such an intoxicating feeling. Every inch of her skin was trembling, every blood vessel was boiling, and every cell seemed to be slightly restless. Bailey Jiaju lowered his eyes and looked at her slightly trembling shoulders. Guji, she could make him excited. Indescribable excitement. He was thinking about how to devour her later. Maybe he should press her under his body. He liked to see the pain humans showed when they were happy. So ruthlessly invade and love. Let her cry under him and even beg for mercy. Thinking of this, Bailey Jiaju used his strength and pressed Hellion Wei Wei tightly into the tent. His nimble tongue overbearingly pried open her pink lips and swept across every inch of land that belonged exclusively to him. That was intolerable and irresistible heat with the temptation of absolute aggression. Until Hellion Vivian's whole body was weak and she was panting, the man let go of her slightly. His ivory fingers skillfully untied the blanket wrapped around her and gently stroked it down slowly. Lowering his head, his kiss fell on Hellion Vivian's collarbone. His big palm lifted her up and the tip of his tongue lingered slowly. He was not in a hurry and seemed to be enjoying it. His skills could even make an ascetic goddess fall head over heels for him. It was recorded in the Bible. The temptation of the devil was invincible. When Bailey Jiaju felt the soft and smooth body under his palm tremble, the corner of his mouth raised slightly. So he was more presumptuous. He wanted to get more of her shy reaction. More. Hellion Vivian knew that it was really difficult to refuse this man, but she still steadied her mind in the end. She pressed him with one hand, looked at him lightly and said with a commanding tone, "I just want to see the sunrise, and you should need to drink another bag of blood." Beligaju stopped kissing. "My master, you are really smart. Devils are best at hunting when they are happy. I don't want to be eaten by you now." Hellion Vivian pulled his fingers over and held them. "You don't have to think of ways to confuse me. I will tell you that wish when it is time to tell you." Beligaju knew that he was trapped. The eternal contract was originally like this. Before the time was up, the devil was not necessarily advantageous. But under normal circumstances, no one could resist his temptation. In the end, it was a wish that he could not pry into. Beligaju clenched his fingers, and there was uncontrollable hostility in his eyes. It seemed that this time it would take some time to deal with this prey. When the time was up, he must completely tear her apart. After all, no one liked the feeling of being trapped. Especially Beligaju, who was a devil. Above the snow line when the sun rose, it could almost illuminate the whole Hozil. That kind of beauty could not be described with words. Hellion Vivian was still wrapped in a blanket, and her back was against Beligaju's chest. When the sun was really shining, she pulled down the tent and pushed Beligaju into the shadow. Now you can't see the sun. What do you want to eat? I will make breakfast and bring it in. Me. Beligaju raised his chin and pointed to the blood bag on the ground. That. Hellion Vivian paused. There are other food besides blood. Since you know that I am a devil, don't expect me to live like a human, my naive master. Beligaju had a faint sneer at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he was unhappy because he had to stay here. Hellion Vivian looked back at him. There's your favorite chocolate. It has nothing to do with whether you are a devil or not. Beligaju didn't speak again. After Hellion Vivian walked out of the tent, she took a deep breath and then prepared breakfast. Joshi was a very professional guide. He even knew very well what people needed most in this area. The other party was even considerate enough to fill the wooden box with beef that the locals liked to eat, as well as some unknown medicines that were used to deal with altitude sickness. On the snowy mountains of Hozil, the most common thing was lack of oxygen. Beligaju was fine, but Hellion Vivian, who took out all her spiritual energy to stabilize Beligaju, became like an ordinary person. Her physical fitness had always been better than others. After all, she had undergone special training. Even if she had some breathing difficulties, she could adjust herself. But at this time she couldn't take oxygen. Once she got used to taking oxygen, she couldn't do without it. Hellion Vivian knew that she had another tough battle to fight. Of course, she did everything to the best of her ability. But here, no matter how tough Hellion Vivian was, she had to adapt to it. Chest tightness and breathing difficulties were common phenomena on the plateau. Hellion Vivian patted her chest twice, adjusted her breathing, and then carried the cannon to the tent. It was portable travel equipment that could heat up bread and milk in a short time. Even if Beligaju didn't eat it, Hellion Vivian still made two, but she replaced the milk with blood and the rest with chocolate. Hellion Wei Wei extended her hand and pushed it in front of Bailey Jiaju. She smiled and said, "Go ahead and eat. After you finish eating, go to the coffin and lie down. It's not good for your health if you come out during the day. Is it fun for you to do this?" The corners of Bailey Jiaju's mouth revealed a charming arc, but the words he spoke were like ice, extinguishing the warmth in the room. May 6, 2016 21:40 Update 1. Moi. Chapter 993. Trapping me here and not letting me go anywhere. I won't let you go. You know very well in your heart that I haven't done anything to you because the devil's contract hasn't expired yet. Dying early or dying late is not the same. My master, you should be feeling very uncomfortable right now. Using all your spiritual energy to suppress the demonic nature in my body, aren't you afraid that before the time is up I will kill you with my own hands? Hellion Vivian looked up and said two simple words, "I'm not afraid." Beligaju stood in the dark corner, and the fog continued to surge out from his body, indicating that he had begun to lose his patience. Hellion Vivian knew that what he said was true. Taking a deep breath, she directly picked up the cup, put it to his lips and then drank it. Blood and soul had never been rejected by demons. The cold and sticky liquid in his mouth slowly slid across his gums, and every pore on his body was frantically opening and closing, desperately absorbing the nutrients in the liquid. This was Beligaju's current nature. He narrowed his eyes in enjoyment, and his white fingers seemed to be more transparent than the sky. Originally, there was an evil look on his handsome face, but now, because of the contrast of blood, it was full of demonic nature. He raised his head with the blood bag in his mouth, and his silver hair grew longer and longer, covering the ground. The second step of demonization. Beligaju's pair of eyes that had long been dyed red stared at Hellion Vivian, who was sitting on the ground opposite him, dark and gloomy, deep and confused. He knew that the hidden crazy gene in his blood was awakening. But he didn't understand why this person was so protective of him. She was clearly about to be swallowed up, so why did she look like it didn't hurt or itch? "Are you cold?" She reached out and hugged him again like a cockroach that couldn't be killed and looked at him very seriously. Beligaju's gaze landed on Hellion Vivian's pale lips. You're the one who's cold, my master. You seem to have forgotten that I'm a demon. Demons don't sense any body temperature. Hellion Vivian was very honest with him. Just like you said, I used my spiritual energy to suppress you. Naturally, you would experience altitude sickness. But it's better to be cold than to lack of oxygen. This land is the most beautiful place in our country. Some people come here before they die to have a sky burial. When I was very young, my father cheated on me and my mother committed suicide. My inheritance was taken away from me and my father sent me to school out of guilt. I've never liked going abroad and I always felt that it was too lonely to stay there. After I met young Master Tang, I heard him talk about the plateau and snow mountains, so I really wanted to come and take a look. If you go further down, there are many vultures that feed on human flesh. If my soul is eaten by you, you can bury me here. I don't want to go back. Your body is also mine. Beligaju's eyes were filled with displeasure. It's better to be eaten by me than by those messy things. Hellion Vivian chuckled. You're right. Then can I hug you to sleep? I took care of you all day yesterday and I'm a little tired. You don't have any body temperature, so you should feel more comfortable hugging me. Beligaju didn't refuse Hellion Vivian this time. Because demons had a strong attachment to their masters. Moreover, as she said, Beligaju didn't like the low temperature here. If he could sleep with a warm body, at least it would be better than sitting on the side. Seeing that he agreed, Hellion Vivian dragged the blanket over, then wrapped the two of them and lay in the soft coffin together. Outside the tent, only the cold wind could be heard. It was probably snowing, so everything was very quiet. Hellion Vivian tightened the blanket again, nestled in Beligaju's arms and softly hummed a song. If heaven and earth are really worth singing about, it's also because of you that it's so noisy. The big world is more hazy than you think. I don't have the heart to fool you anymore. I hope you can understand. Looking at the three realms, you can't find a second person like this. Beligaju listened to the coldness in his ears and reached out to hug Hellion Vivian in his arms. He thought that this would probably be the first soul that he could remember after he ate her. He should have found a treasure. No matter what she did, she wouldn't be annoying. Moreover, her voice was very pleasant to listen to, making people feel comfortable. He was very smart. She knew to prepare so much blood and then bring him to the empty depths of the glacier. This had a very good effect on suppressing his demonic nature. However, these were the things that he hated the most. He thought about why he had found such a soul in the first place, making him feel irritated even when he touched her. Irritated? Such emotions were something that he rarely felt anymore. Thousands of years ago, he looked at the world with eyes colder than God and he could do whatever he wanted. However, soon he was tired of power, tired of the world, tired of the night, tired of others bowing to him. He was not a human. In his dictionary there was never the words birth, old age, illness and death, let alone the Buddhist words of resentment, unrequited love and parting with love. It was better to eat the food as soon as possible. Beligaju licked his thin lips and a faint light rose in his eyes. Hellion Vivian also realized something. She suddenly opened her eyes and stood up. You stay here, I'll go out and take a look. The people of Buddhism are here, I can smell their breath. Beligaju blocked in front of her. Do you think I will let you go out like this? Let you join forces with them to deal with me? It's daytime now. If you betray me, I will be in trouble. Hellion Vivian smiled. Just when he didn't understand why she was smiling, she had already tiptoed and kissed him on the lips. Wait for me to come back. Beligaju wanted to hold the woman's wrist. At that moment, even he didn't know whether he was worried that she would betray him or that she would leave and never appear again. But soon he smiled. As long as the time was up, the contract would take effect. No matter where his mistress ran to as a demon, he would be able to sense her presence and eat her. So there was no need to worry at all. Thinking of this, Beligaju tightly grasped the blood bag in his palm. Clang. The teacup was smashed into pieces. Beligaju held his forehead with one hand, and blood dripped from his fingertips to the ground. Then there was a low laughter like the demon's Sanskrit echoing in the tent. That's good. If she doesn't come back and chooses to betray or run away, I can immediately bite her throat as soon as it's dark. I saw the message, I was very moved, thank you. Chapter 994. For Beligaju, it was best that Hellion Vivian violated the Devil's Pact. In that case he would not have to think of a way to get her wish. It was just that as time passed, Bailey Jiaju's eyes also followed suit and became extremely gloomy. It seemed that people were all the same. No matter who it was, they would choose to betray when they could save their lives. The same went for that woman. She probably took the opportunity to escape. After all, such an opportunity was rare. If she escaped to Buddhism, he would have to spend a lot of effort to hunt her down. However, these humans were too naive. Did they really think that he would not kill his way to Buddhism? Baligaju chuckled, his face was filled with unprecedented coldness. The demons behind him seemed to have sensed his rising anger, and layers of black fog surged out. Be quiet. Baligaju's eyes were deep red and he turned around sharply. The demons immediately hid back into the darkness, afraid that their king would get angry and tear them all apart. The corners of Bailey Jiaju's mouth still carried a smile, but that kind of smile was too icy cold. He stuck out the tip of his tongue and evilly licked the blood that remained on his fingertips. Standing in the shade, his silhouette gradually became silent, a deathly silence. The demons hiding in the darkness knew that the more violent the king was, the easier it was for him to return to the peak state where he could summon the wind and summon the rain. They had begun to feel the exciting bloodlust around them. Although the demons didn't know why such a huge amount of coldness suddenly gushed out of their king's body, such darkness made them jump with joy, like black crows that had smelled their favorite scent. Every inch of them carried an invincible demonic nature. Outside the tent, snow was flying. Hellion Vivian was trapped in the middle by 8 holy monks. Each of them was holding Buddhist beads in their hands, wearing a kasaya and surrounded by spiritual aura. Hellion Vivian's forehead was injured, but her eyes became clearer because of the blood flowing down, like the broken ice on the horizon. With the white cloth wrapped around his left hand, he held onto the hilt of his saber. The phoenix clear trace emitted waves of sharp cries in the snow. With one slash of his saber, the ground was broken and snow was sent flying. There were 10 people lying behind her. They were all sent by the heavenly Tao. They did not have the protection of the Buddhist Dharma, so they could not withstand Hellion Vivian's attack at all. However, the people who came this time were not only Tiandao but also the holy monks of Buddhism. They came specifically to besiege Phoenix. If these people really recited the Buddhist scriptures and formed a barrier, Hellion Vivian would have to use all her strength to deal with them. The holy monks also thought the same. They knew very well that Baligaju had not completely demonized yet because Hellion Vivian used her spiritual energy to balance him. In this way, Phoenix's attack power would be greatly reduced. The injuries on Hellion Vivian's body were the best evidence. The holy monks looked at each other and raised their fingers. The Buddhist scriptures kept overflowing from their thin lips. The scriptures turned into golden words, each of which could cut through the skin. Hellion Vivian avoided the first 4, but she could not avoid the last one. There were always blind spots in all directions. Her cheeks were cut and blood flowed out. The holy monks were merciful after all. They shook their heads and said heavily in Sanskrit, "Your spiritual energy now can't stop us at all. After this battle you will be exhausted and seriously injured. Let us go. Let us pass. He can't live anymore. There is no place in the 3 realms and 6 paths that can accommodate him. He came from the chaos. Without the divinity, he is the disaster of the world. If he doesn't disappear, you will be the one who disappears. As the leader of the Buddhas, why are you so stubborn?" Hellion Vivian did not speak. Blood flowed from his fingertips and dripped onto the glacier, forming a bright red color that made people feel sorry for him. Swish. He did not give her a chance to dodge. Just as she was dealing with the holy light of Buddha, countless silver thorns broke out of the ground around Hellion Vivian's body. With a fast and arrogant manner, they pierced into her body bit by bit. Those were the weapons of Tiandao. The silver needles transformed into vines that wrapped around her and gradually tightened. Every silver blade erupted with countless sharper needles. The needles pierced into her bones and densely tore apart her muscles. The extreme coldness was like venom that was injected into her body, oppressing her heart as if she was suffocating. Blood gushed out of her mouth. "Holy monk, why do you have to say so much to her? As a Buddha, she can't distinguish right from wrong. Such a person should be eradicated." The person who spoke had known Hellion Vivian for a long time. No, it should be said that she knew the phoenix who had always been arrogant. At that time, fairies like them would always be forgotten in places where she appeared. They were obviously kinder than this woman. But Emperor actually fell from heaven and became a demon because of this woman and became a person of the 3 lower realms. What she disliked the most was Phoenix's appearance. A woman was just a little good at fighting and killing. She admitted that Phoenix was the only Buddha who could fight against Emperor. She was so powerful that she could even kill fairies like them with a sword. But now, the spiritual power in her body was not even 1/10 of what it used to be. Oh, what a mess. Phoenix, oh Phoenix, you also have a day like this. The woman of Tiandao's eyes were obviously filled with jealousy. Phoenix, do you think you are very powerful? Even at this point you still want to protect Emperor. To be honest, the person who hurt him to this point is you. The woman raised the soul-seizing needle in her hand again and stabbed it fiercely. Now that you have become his exclusive soul, why don't you just let him eat you? Why do you have to do such boring things? It's really annoying. Don't you know? What demons don't need the most is love. You are imprisoning him. Hellion Vivian's fingers shook. Those silver needles seemed to have found a loophole and stabbed deeper. It's time to end it. Look at yourself. It is because of you that you have implicated Emperor. The woman laughed, her face distorted. You don't know what he wants the most. You are never worthy of him. Stop talking. Hellion Vivian lowered her head, like a beautiful butterfly suspended in the air. But even in such a posture, it was difficult to reduce the coldness of her body. With an indifferent expression, she coldly spat out 2 words. You really don't change. Even now you are still so arrogant. Do you know that your current appearance will only make people feel disgusted? The woman raised her left hand high, her eyes red like flames. You must feel the same, so go to hell. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.